welcome to the future, otherwise known as episode 29 of Tomorrow's World Audit Time. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Russ. How are you?
Actually, what I should have said, Mark, is Hoppy Easter, Mark.
Oh, thank you, Russell.
Yes, this is a very special Easter episode, slightly late because I got too drunk on Easter for us to record closer to the time. But
I wasn't going to mention that, but well done you for being honest.
But yes, the third...
Can I just say, listeners at home, he told me he couldn't find his phone because it was stuck to his back.
Which is quite a feat if you saw the size of my phone. The third in our short run of religious themed episodes. This is an Easter special. I took a look in the Radio Times as usual, searched for Tomorrow's World Easter. There was only 2 results. There was this episode, and there was also an episode where Howard goes to Easter Island. So maybe we'll do that one next year.
Next year.
But this episode comes from one of our more commonly visited years, I think, 26th of March, 1981. So it was both of ours very first Easter, Mark.
Yes, very true. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Oh God, I hadn't even thought of it that way.
Yeah. Don't remember it. I'm sure I was bought lots of eggs though. My mum was a very prodigious Easter egg buyer when I was a kid. I always used to get loads and loads and loads of Easter eggs. I don't know. Did you used to get a lot of Easter eggs, Mark? Or...
I definitely got some. Actually, funny enough, I was thinking like the one Easter, or maybe the first Easter I remember. And I know my mum listens every now and then, so I vaguely remember that when I was about 5, I got chicken pox and I think it was around Easter, because I associate 2 things, which might be separate, but like I think I've talked in this podcast before about my kind of my sense that the platonic ideal of a vehicle is the Postman Pat van.
Of course, yes.
And the way it just absolutely perfectly fits into the hedgerows around the villages he delivers post. So there was one year I really wanted a Postman Pat Easter egg. There was one that came in like a cardboard version of the van, and I remember being ill in bed with chickenpox and drinking, I'm assuming, either Lucasade or flat 7-Up, whichever is the most stereotypical. And then I think Mum struggled to get me a chocolate Postman Pat Easter egg, so she got me a carob one. And I don't really remember the pain and agony of the chickenpox, Russ, but I do know the pain and agony of getting a non-chocolate Easter egg at Easter.
I don't even think I've ever had carob. What is carob? What is it? Is it like
It was basically fake chocolate for people
for
who are
dogs.
allergic to milk, I think, or something like that. Yeah, basically.
Oh right, no, that sounds absolutely disappointing. Vehicle-based Easter eggs. I always used to like the Yorkie lorry. That was always.
That was a good one. That was a good one. Yeah.
I think the two classic of the Easter egg world when we were kids was the Yorkie lorry and the Whisper that came with the blue Whisper mug. Remember that?
Oh wow, yes I do. God, yeah, Easter eggs with mugs.
Yeah.
God, I've completely forgotten about that. You're absolutely. That was a whole thing. It wasn't just Whisper. You could get there was like a dairy milk one as well, wasn't it? Like, there was a few.
I think so. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. For some reason, I always imagined the Whisper one. Though I think that was the most popular one.
Also, I think the other classic kind of Easter egg experience when you're growing up is when you ask for a Cadbury's cream Easter egg, and then are hugely disappointed to realise it is not full of the cream, which obviously had it been like it would have weighed like 4 kilograms, but
yeah, and would have triggered any number of diabetic shocks across the country.
Caused diabetes. That's what it done. Yeah,
I think my favourite. Overall, my favourite Easter egg is the humble Cadbury's mini egg. I'm a big fan of those. I couldn't track any of those down in Amsterdam. But I was like,
the Netherlands.
No.
Oh,
but also that sweet shell on them, and then a nice bit of Cadbury's chocolate in the middle.
Yeah, they are quite good, aren't they?
A giant bag of those, easy peasy.
I'm sure you could, you greedy fucker.
Anyway, right, Easter. I could tell you a few things about Easter, Mark, before we get started. What seems to be the case with all Christian traditions, I've discovered, is that they are constantly just rebadging it, you fool, with pagan stuff. That's all they do. It's another one. It's another pagan thing. So they didn't even bother changing the name this time, because you always think, what Easter? What's that mean? It's got nothing to do with Jesus, is it? It's not. It's a pagan goddess of spring called Yostra. And so they just named it after her. So even though it's a Christian festival, they just didn't bother changing the name at all. So what they did is they basically took that, and they also took the Jewish Passover festival, which is around the same time, and they just combined the two of them together and turned it into a Christian sort of celebration. So yeah, I mean, I won't go into how they calculate when Easter is. It's famously a movable feast, Mark. I won't go into how it's calculated because we, of course, have a a real treat at the end of this episode, where Michael Rodd faultlessly explains to us how Easter is calculated, and I think it's really something to look forward to in this episode, isn't it?
I mean, I would never ever suggest or induce people to just skip straight to the end of our podcast, because frankly, every segment we talk about, there's gold in all those hills. But let's be honest, we're only talking about this episode because of the very last segment.
yeah, it's quite something to listen to. But but yeah, why eggs, Mark? Why eggs? I mean, it's fairly obvious, isn't it? It's to do with fertility and birth and spring,
birth and rebirth,
and things like that.
Yes,
obviously the Christians have decided to claim that it's actually represents the empty tomb of Jesus. That's what they reckon.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Now,
right,
I was brought up Catholic, and no one ever tried that on me.
Oh, so it's a pure coincidence that it's an egg. All right, okay, fair enough. But they've been doing it for years. I mean, they reckon that the earliest ever decorated eggs.
Actually, why can't you buy chocolate tombs then?
Well, exactly, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's one in the eye for the Christians, isn't it? Yeah, they've been decorating eggs for years, long before Christians. So it's always been like a big thing, egg decorating. The earliest decorated eggs they found were somewhere in Africa, deepest, darkest Africa, 60,000 years old. They found decorated eggs. That is an old egg, isn't it?
It is an old egg.
But yeah, the Egyptians were well into it as well. They reckon the first Christians to do it were the Mesopotamians, and they used to stain them red, which apparently to represent the blood of Christ. But then also there's the idea that obviously Lent leads up to Easter, and during Lent you're not allowed to eat eggs, because hence that's why you have Pancake Day, isn't it, to get rid of all the eggs before Lent. So you don't eat any eggs, and then you eat eggs on Easter. So that's another reason why everyone's well into eggs at Easter, because it's the first time they've been able to eat them for 40 days.
Well, I think most people, pick and choose what they give up these days. So I think eggs is not quite the treat it used to be.
I'll tell you what, I eat more eggs than ever these days. More days than not do I have a fried egg sandwich for lunch.
I'm going to suggest that you are Amsterdam's biggest fan of Edwina Curry. That I just made that up, but that sounds like that's true, doesn't it?
I mean, I've not done a survey, Mark, but I could be. I wonder how many people in Amsterdam have heard of Edwina Curry.
Surely it wouldn't be salmonella. It would only be because she was John Major's lover.
Do you know what? I still remember exactly where I was the day I found that out. It was such a shocking story. It's like my my JFK assassination. I can picture exactly where I was standing in Summerfield in Broom Hill in Sheffield, looking at the Sunday newspapers, and I remember seeing that. I'm going, my God, didn't know he had it in him.
God, that must be one of those moments you think like my world has changed.
Yeah, it has.
Before this moment and then this after.
I don't know what to believe anymore, Mark. It's completely, knocked me for six. Anyway, the first chocolate eggs were made by Fry's. Fry's. I don't really. Are they still about? I still do the.
They did Turkish delight and the mint creams.
Yeah. They did them in 1873. Then Cadbury's copied them and started doing them in 1875. So it was the chocolate egg is a British innovation. On Easter egg hunts, you can now get noisy eggs for blind kids. That's a nice modern innovation.
Oh, so no whispers for them then.
No. Fabergé eggs, they were originally made for Easter. Do you know how many Fabergé eggs in total there are in the world, Mark?
That still exist, that were made, that are around?
I'll give you either that were made or that still exist. I've got both figures.
Okay, you've got both figures. So they were made for the Tsar and Tsarina, maybe in his dad.
Obviously, one was made for Roger Moore in that James Bond film. Was it Octopussy, I think?
I think it's Octopussy, isn't it? Yeah. I would imagine that there were maybe 50 made and there's about 25.
69 made.
Ooh, top, my brother.
And 57 are surviving, Mark.
Oh, as many as that. Gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very good. 69, that's incredible.
Imagine if you were like a rebel billionaire, it'd be good to buy a Fabergé egg, wouldn't it? And then fill it with
make an omelette.
No, fill it with Cadbury's cream egg filling.
That would be a renegade thing to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You don't need to buy Twitter to piss people off. You can just
that'd be good. That'd be like a Brewster's Millions thing, isn't it? Where you have to spend the money without having any worth afterwards. But yeah, anyway, Easter bunny. What's that got to do? Bunnies don't lay eggs, Mark. Also, I was thinking,
no,
it's never an Easter rabbit. In all other uses, rabbit and bunny tend to be interchangeable. apart from Easter. You
Yes.
never say Easter rabbit, do you?
You never. No, you don't.
It's weird.
Sounds like a sex toy, doesn't it? Rather than a
Yeah.
That is weird. So why the Easter bunny then?
Well,
Where
it
did that
turns
come
out
from?
it's not even a rabbit or a bunny. It's a hare, Mark. It's originally a hare, and it's the Germans. The German Lutherans. They'd seen the success of Father Christmas, or Sinterklaas, as they would call him, the success of him at keeping kids behaved at Christmas. So they decided to invent a bunny for Easter that basically had the same superpowers as Father Christmas. It knew whether the kids were naughty or nice and gave them gifts if they were nice. Yeah, and so
That is actually so desperately simple.
yeah. So then
I'm actually impressed.
So then, obviously, the separate tradition for the eggs, they just kind of got smushed together. So there was the existing egg giving or egg celebrating thing, and then they went, oh, the Easter Bunny's giving out presents. We might as well get him to give out eggs, and then kill two birds with one stone.
That's incredible.
So yeah, so they just got combined, really, Mark. No, and I was thinking, obviously at Christmas, all of the shops are filled with Christmas music. You get, Slade and all of this. Do any shops, ever play like Easter playlists? And then I was thinking, the only song I can think of that they'd be able to play is Chaz and Dave's Rabbit. So imagine if you just went in the supermarket and they were just playing Chaz and Dave's Rabbit 24 hours.
But they're not gonna play that in Tesco's or any other place. It's just going to be Sainsbury's.
Oh yeah, you got more rabbit than Sainsbury's. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a very hyper specific location. Easter cheers.
I might write a letter to Sainsbury's and tell them that
Dear Mr. J. Sainsbury.
yeah. Any other rabbit-based songs? Oh, Bright Eyes. There you go. You can see Bright Eyes from Watership Down. Yeah, it's two songs.
Jump Around by Criss Cross.
I thought that hip hop to hippity hop hop. That one count. Anyway, that's a brief rundown of Easter, Mark. It's all a load of rebadged paganism and nonsense, really. But yeah, so shall we crack on with the first segment, Mark?
Let's do it, Russ.
When a lumberjack shows off his skill with an axe, he knows just where the blow will land. It's a lot more fun than chopping firewood. See, the problem is, unless you split the wood first time, the axe gets stuck. So, maybe here's a solution. Now, the log-splitting power of this new design lies in the addition of two metal levers set into the head of a conventional axe. Each lever rotates through 90 degrees on a pivot, and it's spring-loaded in the closed position. So, as the blade enters the top of the log, the levers swing out, transforming the downward momentum of the blow into an outward force to wrench the wood apart. All of that is theory. What you're about to see is the real thing. Ah! Good grief, it works.
Good grief, it works, Mark.
I'm convinced.
A very brief opening segment there, Mark, but action-packed as we see a couple of... we think they might be Canadians, don't we? A couple of Canadians.
Well, I think it's because it looks like it's the same film stock that they used when they went to Vancouver and Toronto in, 1976? Only 5 years before? I mean, it's really grainy. I don't know. They just didn't look American to me. I can't put my finger on it. Though you reckon they look like East London hipsters.
They look really like hipsters to me. I mean, obviously, I know they're not hipsters, but they could easily pass any hipster entry barriers that you'd like to put in front of them. They had
I think that's
ankle
correct.
swinging trousers, big beards, check shirts. They were doing axe throwing, which I believe, I don't know whether it still is, but that was certainly a short-lived trend for axe throwing in the hipster community, I think.
Yeah. Plenty of bearded friends of mine have gone axe throwing in London. Fact.
But it's there to demonstrate this exciting. There's a few tools more beautiful in its simplicity as an axe, Mark. But someone's come along and thinks they've been able to reinvent the wheel here, and they've made a new innovative type of axe. I can definitely say that at least one was sold because I remember having seen one of these in real life.
Probably in North Carolina?
I think so. Yeah, I think that'd be the only place I could think of I would have seen it. Yeah, my dad certainly didn't have one. It just seems like the sort of place I'd see.
Because the thing is, I mean, the people at home would have listened. So it's an axe blade that has kind of these two movable parts, these kind of little kind of silver things that as the axe goes into the wood, they push out and they split the wood a little bit better than the normal axe. But the weird thing is, the reason I was so kind of convinced that this couldn't have been a real thing is because I have seen Instagram spits up a whole load of weird things based on the algorithm, and I have seen an actual American lumberjack explain how the axe that we have domestically is actually the axe type they use to chop down a tree, not to chop the wood from a tree. And he then demonstrated by showing the head of the axe they used to actually create lumber manually. And it was the blade was much fatter. I mean, it still had the sharpness of the edge, but the angles that met the tip. Oh, I can't explain it. I'm not a man who works. I'm not a labourer. I'm sorry, but come with me on this journey. The axe head was wider. At its widest point to the top of the tip was much shallower, so that the blade, as it entered, sent more force out, splitting the wood, which is exactly what you want. Whereas the domestic axe was much thinner, so all it did was wedge itself in wood, which is obviously it's all happened to us. Even I have tried to cut timber wood. So the idea that actually the way of doing it was to, as you said, there's barely anything more simple than an axe. Simple wooden handle and a simple metal blade. The fact that they seem to think it would improve with moving bits that, as you say in the notes, like surely they only get gunked up on, lumber. I cannot believe that you've seen one in the wild.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely amazed. I cannot believe that you've never mentioned it before.
I'd completely forgotten about it until I saw it. I thought, I have seen it. I've inspected that up close because I remember looking at it thinking, I can't see how this works.
Yeah.
Luckily, I found a YouTube video.
Chopper1axe.com. All right. Oh, look, there's a lovely little picture.
Where they have a slow motion demonstration of actually what's going on. Because I don't think Kieran does a
He does not explain what it
massively
does. He really
good
doesn't. No.
demonstration. So this.
I'm going to be honest, based on the rest of the segment, this may not be his forte.
So there we go. Look at
Ooh,
this.
that's exciting. Whoa.
So it hits there. Look, and those levers actually push.
Ah, I see.
They physically push the wood apart.
Like you're elbowing your way through a crowded tube.
Yeah. So when you see that, you see, I can see that.
Okay, I get it. Yes.
So it really is. So as he says, it's converting downwards motion to sideways motion.
Yes.
Whereas I guess a normal axe, it would kind of be diagonal motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's still going with most of the force is still going in the direction of the axe head piercing in. It's not really pushing out, which is why that other video I saw has an axe head that has a shallower blade top.
Slow down, Professor, with your technical terms.
Yeah, I think I've explained it.
As you say, there is actually a surprisingly large amount of men with axe content on YouTube and the internet in general. And I had a look through there's a few more videos I watched, and I actually watched somebody like using it properly, not in slow motion sort of thing.
Just out of interest, do you watch all these YouTube videos logged in?
Yeah.
Oh my god, the suggestions you must get. Oh, they don't know who you are, YouTube. You must be about the only person in the world they don't understand.
I actually confounded them with This thing, absolutely, if you hit that log correctly, it sends the wood flying. Like, there was some bloke doing it on his driveway, and the two halves of the log were like zooming way off into the distance. So it's actually, I think, in some ways might be slightly too effective.
Too good.
It does, because you kind of don't want to have to, traipse across your garden to collect the log every time you split one.
No.
I suppose you could have some,
or be concerned for anyone standing near you.
I suppose you could have a couple of kids with wearing baseball mitts or something to stand on the other side, or dressed as wicket keepers or something like that. They could stop it for you, I guess.
That's much more Canadian, isn't it? Wicket keeper. Not an ice hockey goaltender. No, not for Russell. A wicket keeper.
Who do you think would win a fight between a wicket keeper and an ice hockey goalkeeper?
My initial instinct was the wicket keeper, just because I think they have a greater amount of mobility. But I think the tank build of the ice hockey goaltender and the fact that they're on their haunches for more time, I would argue, probably means that in the end they'd win out just by sheer attrition.
Quite like to see it.
Why? What do you think?
I don't know. I just quite like to see.
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I think
I actually, yeah.
Could be, could be a new
Actually, the other thing is, I think goaltenders, they actually have a hockey stick, whereas wicketkeepers don't have a bat.
No, that's true. That's true.
So that might be the game changer.
They could quickly pull up a sharpened stump though, and use that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Throw a handful of bales to distract them. Oh, they're flailing around, and then straight under the armpits.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So as you saw with that little title card on the thing, this axe is known as the Chopper One, which obviously would have delighted our teenage selves.
Teenage, yeah.
You can't get any other version of this axe. It is only made by Chopper
Ooh.
One. It is patented and made by them, and they first started making them in 1975. It seems like not many of them have left the United States, which is why I suspect that that's where I saw one. But the guy who makes it makes them in New Jersey. He stopped making them in 1989 because he had other things to do. And what happened was that the second-hand market in them became really competitive, and they just started to get, they really hold their price because there's real sort of Chopper One fans, Mark. They're real purists that want these. So according to his website, due to the demand for used choppers and the ability to sell them over the internet, he staged a comeback. And so since 2020, they've been making and selling new ones of these, all to the original design. So they're just as good as the old ones. They're now overseen by a man called John Maxman, who is, of course, known as Maxman the Axeman.
Of course.
So he's in charge of production and distribution these days. And you get a brand new one will cost you $139.99 in dollars from the chopper1.com.
That seems reasonable enough.
Yeah. So it's it's not a huge worldwide success. However, it's kind of like, I don't know, I was thinking, what's it remind me of? It's kind of like, recumbent bicycles.
Yes.
Like it looks kind of awkward, but the people who've got one absolutely swear by it and, are real loyalists to it. I feel like the Chopper One is the recumbent bicycle of the axe world.
To be honest, I would probably judge the owners of either equally as strongly. So yeah, I believe you. Now, I should say, all this research you've done, because of your dedication to researching all these things. But obviously you didn't need to, because Kieran's demonstration of this axe is so profound and incredible. Would you like to describe it? Would you like to paint it into words for us? Just because listeners will have heard him say, "Good grief, it works." So they are now picturing the explosion of timber across wood lane.
He looks like he's never held an axe or swung an axe before in his life.
Yep.
And I know in previous...
And he still hasn't.
In previous episodes, we've commented on how very, very slim Kieran is as a man. And I suspect that maybe he's so slim that he has negligible upper body strength, which means he's not a natural axe man. But it's quite weird because we see, he doesn't really swing the axe, he kind of just drops it. But then it cuts away to the log. And you'd think, well, maybe they could, do a bit of BBC Lies and cut to a log being beautifully cleaved asunder in two.
Yeah, definitely.
But they don't do that. They just show his absolutely shocking attempt at...
I think if I use the word he shaves the log, I'm still doing Kieran a great service, because... I don't know, it is like being at a deli and seeing, prosciutto just beautifully, wafer thin, sliced off. Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe the Chopper One is excellent for shaving meats as well. I don't know. Coming to a kebab shop near you. But
yeah, especially if you want each half of the meat on different sides of the room.
Which look quite ordinary, often involve sophisticated technology today. This yellow tablet, for example, was designed to dissolve slowly once it's inside the body, steadily releasing its drug throughout a 12-hour day. It starts to erode away as the tablet passes through the digestive system. Here it's in the stomach. So the drug can be carried away by the bloodstream to different parts of the body where it's needed. But to be sure that drugs are released at the right time, doctors need to know the precise rate at which the tablet dissolves. But investigating the way tablets behave in the body is not without its problems. Those pictures you've just seen were taken using this instrument, a gastroscope. And it's this part which actually has to go down the patient's throat until it reaches the stomach. a difficult business, and it doesn't even tell the scientists how fast the drug dissolves. In the past, they even tied tablets to pieces of thread. The patient swallowed it, and then it was pulled out from time to time to check how much of the tablet had dissolved. Or you can do laboratory tests, putting tablets into pieces of equipment like this and watching how fast it dissolves. Although you can't guarantee that tablets will behave naturally in the laboratory. But now there is an easier way of studying tablets in the body using a trick from nuclear medicine here at Nottingham University. What they do is they radioactively label part of the drug, mix it with larger quantities of the drug, add the base material of the tablet, compress the mixture, so you end up with a radioactive tablet.
It's as safe as having an X-ray, and it can be followed through the digestive system.
That's done using a gamma camera, which has a sodium iodide crystal behind here to pick up the radiation. That's converted into electrical signals, which are shown on the monitor. All that's needed now is for me to swallow the tablet. But first of all, I'll just prove that it is radioactive. There's certainly no doubt about that. Right, here goes. Now I have to take a liquid containing a different radioactive marker. That outlines the stomach and the rest of the alimentary canal.
Now, Judith does something in this piece, Mark, which I've see happen in lots of times in films and TV, and I don't understand how anybody can do it. She swallows a tablet without using any water or to wash it down. Can you do that?
No, I can't. I have seen people do them, and to the best of my memory, I think they were all women, Ross. I think women are very good at it. I think they're just so used to taking tablets for, lots of different reasons.
Oh, yeah.
That they just, they literally, I mean, they'd be like Veruca Salt in, they'd be rolling around full of water if they had to down a glass every time. No, I'm probably more like you, where it's like, I probably need like 14 pints just to, and because it just sticks to my mouth, because my body refuses to accept it. I remember when I went to India, I had to have malaria tablets all the time, and it was weird. Like, you'd have ones that you had to have twice a day, and they were small, and you'd have to have one you have once every 3 days, and for some reason it was comedically large, and it was like a suppository you had to swallow, and it was just like it took me 10 minutes. I don't know how she does it.
No.
And it's, especially as she then immediately follows it up by drinking a radioactive drink.
Well, I mean, and that moves on to the next point, because something that you quite wisely raised is Judith Hann Britain's most radioactive TV presenter?
Absolutely.
She is forever swallowing radioactive stuff. And I know
she's more Chernobyl than woman at this point, isn't she?
I mean, she always claims that it's only the same as 3 X-rays or whatever. It normally compares it to X-rays. The radiation is always either compared to a number of X-rays or trips across the Atlantic in an aeroplane. There always seems to be the two comparisons.
How many X-rays have you had? Look?
How many X-rays I had? I've broken my arm once, so that was one. And I've been X-rayed by the dentist probably twice in my life, maybe.
Yeah. So there you go. So that's at least 2. Let's say for the leg, for your arm rather, that they probably also X-rayed you a second time just to make sure it had healed. So let's say that's 4. So I think I've been X-rayed, once in the mouth and then twice in the legs. That's 3. And we're both in our 40s. What we aren't doing is rushing down and getting X-rayed every week for shits and giggles. Nor are we flying across the Atlantic every day. No one should be consuming this much radiation. And the thing is, to prove it's radioactive, she puts it up against a dosimeter or a Geiger counter or something like that, and it goes fakakta. It absolutely is screaming loudly at us all.
Yeah. Do you think she's developed any sort of Hulk-like superpowers as a result of all this exposure?
I didn't, but I do now.
She didn't really age over the course of Tomorrow's World all that much, did she? She between 1980 and say 1994, she didn't appear to age at all. So I presume maybe the radiation somehow prevented her from aging. That might be.
You're saying that radiation is a preservative?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm on board with that. Well, and the evidence is there with our own eyes.
I think this is the least interesting segment to me in this episode.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
I think
100%.
maybe. I mean, it's medical, isn't it? It's kind of. But it's the boring kind of medical, really. I guess there's something interesting to be said about how they design pills to have delayed reactions or whatever it is in the stomach and things like that.
That is interesting.
Because there's probably a lot of science behind that, but that's not really what she's showing us here, is she? She's just showing us.
I thought that would be an interesting segment if they actually kind of broke down like new technology for designing pills that had quick release, that were delayed release, that seemed to, like, she seems to imply that there are pills that are designed to dissolve only after they've gone through the stomach. So I mean, it seems quite sophisticated and quite interesting. That's not what this is about. This is about how they go about discovering whether their experimental pills work. And don't get me wrong, that's obviously really good because, and the reason we know that is because the techniques they used to use that she describes, I mean, it sounds like Abu Ghraib. It sounds like bloody torture.
Yeah, that really sent a shiver down my spine when she said, basically it's kind of like the old trick to fool a chocolate dispenser or something from the olden days, where they tie a bit of string around the pill and then post it into somebody and then just pull the string and pull it back out of their stomach again.
Yeah, very much against the grain. Yeah, and then just have a look at it and then no doubt send it back down again.
And I just couldn't. I mean, I know want the conditions to be as close as possible, to make sure that this experiment is done properly. But surely there must be a way of just making a fake stomach in a jar that they could just do the same thing to without some poor sap having to undergo that sort of treatment. I mean, they probably got paid very well, though, didn't they?
I certainly hope so. But it's just a reminder, anyone who's tempted to earn big bucks doing some of these medical experiments, like, the reason they're paying you big bucks is because no one would volunteer for it. It's not fun.
No.
And the alternative, the next best alternative, apparently, is to gobble down radiation.
I wonder what radiation tastes like. Might be delicious, mightn't it? You never know.
Well, according to Judith, based on our experience with Judith, it's very mush. It's got all that umami we all love.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just detection equipment. Detection equipment's got a lovely sort of rainbow pattern on it. Not sure why. It wasn't explained. What's the other? Oh, and the one other thing about this segment is that at the beginning, it doesn't start properly, does it? It starts.
No.
There's a huge error. I think it's the second segment we've ever had where it starts halfway through her speaking. So it's like they've switched the sound on too late. So we'll never know what she says at the beginning. Right? It could be vital information we will never be able to witness.
We can just but imagine what she said. Probably it was the location of the Holy Grail, and now it was just lost to the mist of time.
Yeah, I think it was maybe because the Kieran bit was live. Kieran swinging the axe was live, and he did such a magnificent job of chopping that piece of wood that they lingered on him longer than they planned to, and then that's why when they cut to the next bit.
Having watched it many times, I can absolutely see why they did not cut away immediately after he balls it up. It was a masterpiece.
Maybe he's doing a walk of shame, actually. Maybe it's...
They want to really make him suffer.
So pills, Mark. I didn't know what this machine was that they were using, but I was able to look into the concept of the actual interesting thing that we were just talking about. How do they make these pills delayed reaction and all this? Turns out it's like a big science, Mark. It's like a really important part of pharmacology these days. So much so that the technology that is referred to these days is controlled release, over its umbrella term. And there's actually a controlled release society. There are 1,600 members in 50 countries. And they have a bi-weekly magazine, Mark. They have a bi-weekly magazine called the Journal of Controlled Release.
As in twice a week?
What's bi-weekly?
Fortnightly.
Fortnightly, isn't it? Yeah, it must be.
Fortnightly, yeah. Okay. Well, no, bi-weekly is a bit like bi-monthly. Bi-monthly means both every 2 months and twice a month.
I can't imagine they could do 2 issues a week, could they? Just on delayed release tablets.
When you say delayed release like that, though, it just kind of sounds like a porn search term, doesn't it? So yeah, maybe it is.
I was just thinking that something called the Journal of Controlled Release would be a good sort of magazine to have next to the toilet, actually. But yeah, I mean, there's also these different sort of controlled release or also called modified release tablets. There's you can get different subsections of it. So you've got controlled delivery, controlled release, delayed release, extended release, immediate release, long-acting release, modified release, prolonged release, sustained action, sustained release, timed release, and extended release. And basically, each one is a very subtle different thing, and it's to do with where in the body. Obviously, when you swallow something, you don't have a huge amount of control as to what happens to it. It's going to take the same course, but you can very much change at what stages on that journey the drug comes out. And sometimes you want the drug to sort of come out constant, or sometimes you want the drug to sort of taper off, or sometimes you want the drug to come out in pulses. It's another one. So if they want to distribute it down the intestine in loads, then you can do that as well. The main way they do it is the tablet they make of like a sort of like a very fine mesh, like an insoluble mesh. Put the drugs in that, and the drugs are soluble and the mesh isn't, and so it takes, because the holes in the mesh are so fine, it takes a long time for the drug to escape out of the tiny holes. So that's like the main way they do it. If you've got different drugs that need to be released at different times, they can make really special ones that are like gobstoppers, like the everlasting gobstopper.
Yeah.
So you have a layer of one thing and then another layer, and so they'll put different soluble, like they'll sandwich different layers of the drug, and then a soluble layer, and then the drug, and then like that, so that as it gets dissolved to different parts release. That's another way of doing it. But then my favourite one, Mark, the most exciting one easily, is the Oros, which is the osmotic controlled release oral delivery system. They get a little rigid tablet, and they drill a hole in it with a laser. Okay. And it's got the drug inside it, and it goes into your body, and it can absorb water. It can absorb water into it, and as it absorbs water into it, the water pressure inside builds up, and it builds up to such a point that the drug comes squirting out the laser drilled hole. They are way ahead of us. Yeah. It's all exciting stuff. Big business, and everyone, everyone seems all on top of it. The only drawback, of course, Mark, is if you're like us and you struggle to take large tablets or such like. If you have to break the tablet in half, it completely ruins whatever system you've. So I understand. So these, if you've got one of these special tablets, you have to make sure you take it in one go. You have to force it down, Mark. You can't. There's no half measures with these things. So yeah, that's the only drawback. But other than that, yeah. So all good. So yeah, definitely made it to the future.
And it's reassuring to know that radiation is incredibly healthy, and that at no point in this episode will we be told otherwise.
No.
In this week's Radio Times, you may have seen an article on tomorrow's world, and a deceptively simple photo.
Which only takes a moment to look at, but is in fact a time-consuming piece of work.
So today we're going to keep our promise to show what went into making it.
And why it took so long to complete. Of course, the picture you're seeing now is made electronically and transmitted live, but its twin, printed in Radio Times, actually went to press 4 weeks ago. As the presses roll, the colour pages are printed onto vast lengths of paper. At full speed, this process is incredibly fast. Passing each page over the series of cylinders which build up the full colour image takes a matter of seconds. Preparing the colour pictures to produce that image takes much longer, so all decisions about these colour pages have to be made 5 weeks before printing starts. But now, technology is being developed which could cut that timescale drastically. The idea is to employ electronics in the translation of the original photographs into the composite image on the magazine page, a process which at the moment involves special photographic films which are used to produce the printing cylinder. But an awful lot of them are needed. Films are employed to reduce the size or alter the shape of the image, to marry one image on top of the other, to ensure the right proportion of blue, yellow, red and black in the magazine page so that the colours represented there are true recreations of the colours in the original photographs. Films are also needed for retouching, for correcting minor blemishes, for modifying small areas, and the list by no means ends there. But soon, all these films could be replaced by magnetic memories. At the heart of the new system is a scanner, a drum on which each photograph is rotated allowing a record to be made of the brightness and colour of every point on the picture. Once this information has been fed into the computer's memory, the press of a button can call up the original image on a monitor screen, and the operator can manipulate that information, even replacing bits, like Judith's fingers, that get lost in the shuffle. Data from one memory can be drawn out and superimposed on information from another. But even publishers who already use this layout technique now have to resort to traditional photographic film, because the hand of the artist is still needed for the final beautification, moving hairlines, altering necklines. Using a fine brush, and in this case a small quantity of bleach, a less than perfect set of teeth can be whitened. Not that the eye can see the result here. Even the artist will only know if she's got it right when she sees a printed proof. Now, even the most delicate of retouching can be achieved electronically in seconds. And what's more, if I don't like the changes I'm making, I can alter them instantly, because all the while I can see what I'm achieving on a colour television screen. So, what about that smile? Well, let me start by magnifying the image and filling the screen with Rod's face. Now, it took the expert doing it conventionally 10 minutes to brush up the simper into something presentable. Let me introduce a cursor across into our image and attempt to do in seconds more or less the same thing. Now, what I'm doing now is delineating the area that I want to alter electronically. Right, all the way around the teeth. Now, I can alter the intensity of the teeth, quite independent of everything else in the picture, with some amazing results. The same technique can suggest some extravagant makeup for Judith's eyes, and catch a special twinkle in Kieran's. Watch the eye on the right carefully. I can even give Sue a useful third hand. Just a few examples of what this prototype electronic system is capable of doing. And of course, the computer now contains all the information for producing the actual printing cylinder. So, why not take this process one stage further? Link it to a laser, and we have the basis of an entirely new system for engraving cylinders.
Well, I'm wishing I put my sunglasses on for that segment there, Mark, because Rod's teeth are absolutely blinding in this segment, Mark. It's almost Simon Cowell-esque in their gleaming brightness.
He clearly came back from his US road trip with more than just memories.
This is quite a long segment, Mark. It's easily the longest segment.
It is, yeah.
But I did find it interesting because I was genuinely impressed by the how good the technology was that he was using, considering this is 1981. The software seems pretty futuristic. I mean, it's not quite, it's not Photoshop levels, but yeah, considering what generally computers could do in 1981, this seems way ahead of most.
Well, I mean, what year is it that we have the episode where he plays with the police Photoshop?
Oh yeah.
Was that also 81, or was that a bit earlier? Maybe that was very late 70s, or maybe it was 79. I think, was it?
Something like that. Yeah.
And and that was real rope-a-dope stuff, wasn't it?
Mm.
And here we are, a few years later. Let's say between 2 and 4 years later, probably. The equipment is gigantic. There's no two ways about it. But the software and the idea behind it is.
And also, I enjoyed entirely unconnected. But I think probably would have been quite impressive at the time. Special effect they do at the beginning of this, where they create this montage. They've got a montage.
Oh, should we describe what the picture is? That's because actually that was one thing that slightly frustrated me, is that we see a front cover of that week's Radio Times, which is a glorious portrait of a very handsome Lester
looking ancient in that photo. I checked to see how old he would have been.
Oh
in
yeah,
that photo, 45, Mark.
Jesus, Russ. That makes us look like we're in our teens.
Yeah.
And we are not far off his age. And I'm assuming this must have been around the weekend of the Grand National, because that's always kind of mid-April, isn't it? Rod assumes everyone has a copy of the Radio Times, and so we've all seen the photo, which, to explain, it's Rod holding a picture, and in the picture is Judith holding a picture, and in that picture of Judith is a picture of Kieran Prendiville holding a picture, and then it's a picture of Sue Ingle holding something. I can't. That's correct, isn't it? It's like a kind of a Russian nesting doll, and it's a really great picture. And so that throughout this whole piece, that is kind of what he's talking about, how it took 4 weeks to get that in the print shop and blah, blah, blah. And obviously it was all done through photography. Whereas right at the beginning of this segment, they do it by doing some live inline editing where they're cutting from camera to camera. And clearly each of them is holding a green screen. So they replicate the photo in which the live image of the previous host is superimposed on their little green square. And it's actually really well done, I think.
Yeah, and weirdly, even though it's a still image of Judith, I swear to God she blinks. So I don't know whether that's some sort of weird artifact in the video or what, but it really does look like
possibly.
It really does look like she blinks. She's definitely a still image of her, but it definitely looks like she blinks.
I tell you what, though, she does not have whorish makeup on like Rod digitally applies to it later.
No. I did actually check. I was wondering, Radio Times. I mean, how likely were people at home to have a copy of the Radio Times? Seems like probably they were quite likely. Radio Times circulation in the 80s was very high. I mean, far higher than that. These days, circulation is still about 480,000 copies
a week.
Yeah.
Gosh.
But
God, that's really high.
But the Radio Times holds the British record for the highest selling single issue of a magazine ever.
One of the Christmas
specials is their 1988 Christmas edition, Mark. Have a guess how many copies it sold. I'll let you into the nearest 5.
Nearest 5 copies. Thank you, Ross. That's very generous. 30 million households. 88. So that was after they liberalized the magazines and they forced them to each, because you used to have to get the Radio Times to TV Times, didn't you? Or maybe it was the last year.
In this week's
I remember
TV
at home
Times.
We would always get the Christmas ones, but we'd have to get the Radio Times for the BBC channels. We'd have to get the TV Times for UTV and Channel 4, and then we'd have to get the RTE Guide for RTE. So we would have 3 of these damn things on the go. So my answer would be, so to the nearest 5, okay, 4,325,426 copies.
It's good, but it's not the one, Mark. It was
Oh.
11,220,666 copies.
My God, that has to be about a third of all households that Christmas had the Radio Times. Oh my God, that is insane,
Isn't it?
That is incredible.
Yes.
Gosh, but actually, do you know what though? Like, as incredible it is that many copies were bought, how incredible is it that they must have printed about 12 million copies?
Yeah. So this obviously this publisher where Rod is situated, I assume it's probably the same place. Was the same place that published it all through the 80s. It's an absolutely one of the hardest working presses in Britain. I would have thought, churning out all those copies.
As much as I really enjoyed the thing he discussed and you were saying, is like it was really cool. Actually, again, it's one of those things where it's really lovely to see a window into how things were done. And it's like just the printing process is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's just, because we don't print anything like that, not domestically or at work. I'm sure that's how still books and stuff are printed. But it's like, it is mind-boggling the engineering that goes into printing the Radio Times. But then even the technique of manually whitening teeth is also mind-boggling as well. That bit I really enjoyed too. But yeah, that setup was incredible to churn out all those literally millions of copies of the Radio Times.
Yeah, no, I looked at. I was wondering because I thought, I'm quite interested to see how these presses work, and it seems that Rod is absolutely bang on here. So the actual process of printing hasn't really changed. The actual physical printing of the ink. So it still is the case where they have drums which have the image of the pages as like a plate, and the drums roll through ink, and then they roll the ink onto the page. That's still the way it's done. The difference is the way that the plates are created. If the plates are they're aluminium normally, as Rod explains here, they were back then using photographic techniques. So what they would do, they would have the photographic image of the page, and they'd put it on the aluminium, and then they'd expose it to strong ultraviolet light, and that would cause the parts of the aluminium that could be seen would then react to the light, and there's obviously the parts that were covered with the photograph wouldn't react to the light, and then when they washed a solution over it, it would leave recesses on the covered bits, and it wouldn't recess the uncovered bits. So then you've basically got an etching of the page on the roller, and that's what they would use to.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just mind-blowing, isn't it?
So then, obviously, over the years, they changed it so that a computer created these photographic plates. And then, as Rod explains there, now, and this is what they still use now, they get a laser. That's actually still regarded as, the cutting edge technology now for mass produced printing is using a laser to make these plates for the printing. So Rod's absolutely cutting edge of printing technology here, and he's called it correctly. That is what they use for the printing. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
That is fascinating. Yeah, that's really interesting.
That's sort of secondary, the printing process. The only touches on that, but the main part of it is the actual image manipulation thing. And I quite enjoyed some of the manipulations that he does to test the system. He obviously whitens his own teeth, refers to himself in the third person when he's doing it.
Yes, he does. Yeah, and I have to say, it's like I suppose it fascinated me. You think of all this incredible engineering, from like the Guggenheim press that was churning out Bibles for people to read and stuff like that, all the way through to now. You think all this labor and so much effort and thought and money and time and intelligent people's developing new approaches, all to make sure that the talent have slightly whiter teeth. and no amount of talking about yourself in the third person can hide the fact that vanity is at the heartbeat of this entire segment. And the next one.
I think Judith would have been absolutely furious about this.
Livid.
There's that famous Simpsons episode where Homer becomes an inventor, and he invents the makeup shotgun, and he blasts it in Marge's face, and then she said, "Homer, I think you've got it set to whore," and he basically does this to poor old Judith's face, doesn't he? He gives her some ridiculous sort of eye makeup, which I don't think she would like at all. Makes it look a clown.
Yeah, it's highly disrespectful.
Then I think maybe he's being slightly racist towards Kieran because he talks about giving him a twinkle in his eye, which is a very sort of Irish stereotype, isn't it? So it makes Kieran do a weird sort of crappy wink.
Yeah, it's not very good.
And then he gives Sue a third hand.
Yeah. Which is lazy. Which I think really reveals where Sue stands in the hierarchy, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it would have been brilliant if, rather than the professionally made photo that they actually used that took them 5 weeks to do, they just used Rod's effort in the Radio Times that week.
Right at the beginning, he gives it away that the copy in the Radio Times is not what he's going to show you. And I suppose that's what I thought was surprising, was that initially, but then I thought about it. So I thought it was surprising that surely the segment showing how he made that, well, not how technology made this photo would make the image in the Radio Times that much more compelling for people to go like, oh gosh, yeah, wow, interesting. But of course, there is an elephant in the room throughout this entire segment, which is the hugely powerful position of the unions in the printing business in the UK, specifically in the 70s and the 80s, which meant that any new technology that was invented that could in any way make things quicker, faster, cheaper, and more importantly, challenge employment was never going to come in.
I mean, and this is such a massive labour saver, isn't it? You'd
Absolutely,
be able to sack loads of people if you brought in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just Michael Rod and a laser, and now you got 12 million copies of the Radio Times. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I was like, so it was one of those things where I was initially thinking like, oh, well, why didn't they do it? And it was like, well, because I would imagine they would have gone on strike, and I'm not. That's not a throwaway. I'm not trying to be flippant. It's like that's literally what would happen. That was one of those things Rupert Murdoch did, wasn't it? It was like when he came in. Well, not when he came in because he came in the 60s, but like when they closed the Wapping plant, it was because they were basically saying it's like, we're in the 1980s now. We're not going to continue with labor practices and approaches from the 1960s. Things have moved on. We have to make money. It's like, and that is not me defending Rupert Murdoch either, but I'm just saying, actually, this is the reality of the day, was that it was a heavily protected industry. Innovation was not the watchword.
No. I remember somebody told me a story. Some old person I used to work with told me a story about how they couldn't change the paper in the photocopier because they weren't a member of the
print workers union.
Oh
my
Something
god!
like that. It was something along those lines, something mad like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I don't know, billionaire tyrant Rupert Murdoch's along and shakes things up, I guess. But I tried to find out what this machine is, isn't it? Because there's no labels on it or anything like that. And actually, it was quite hard to track it down because it's one of those things where, according to the internet, the invention of Photoshop is essentially year zero of image manipulation. But Photoshop wasn't invented until 1987. So I did eventually track down that this is probably a thing called a Scitex system, SCITEX, made by an Israeli company, and they were like the first big tech company in in Israel. So yeah, they were the only ones really making stuff like this for like the 70s and early 80s, and but they don't exist anymore. They got broken up and merged and stuff. And Robert Maxwell used to be in charge at one point. So yeah,
really,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
that's all I need to know.
But one of these, I mean, running one of these systems, they reckon. So in 1987, which is when Photoshop was invented, they reckon that running one of these Scitex systems would cost you about $300 an hour to run.
Whoa.
Whereas an Apple Mac in 1987 cost $895. And then you could just stick a copy of Photoshop on it and do as much image manipulation as you like. It was invented by two brothers called Thomas and John Knoll. And you know who John Knoll is, Mark?
No.
He's the Chief Creative Officer of Industrial Light and Magic.
Oh, wow.
And he did the special effects for so many films like The Abyss and Star Trek, all Star Trek Next Generation, all the Star Wars prequels and Pirates of the Caribbean. He's basically done all the big effects films since the 80s. He's been overseeing. And it just as a side, like this, his brother Thomas came up with this thing initially and went in together, flogged it to Adobe for $34.5 million. Overachieving family.
That's hugely impressive. yeah. What a bunch of knobs.
But yeah, that's the thing. Obviously, since that was invented, that's the industry standard now. So everyone just uses Photoshop or clones of Photoshop. This is a bit of a glimpse into the future here. Rod's calling it correctly. We do now have all this image manipulation, and we do have laser-powered printers. So
you're doing your order for us, Russ. But I mean, that's I'm not surprised because actually, it is one of those things where you watch it and you go, oh, that looks very familiar. Like it looks like, oh, that's basically what we do now, but like giant. Like it's an entire room to do what we can do. The only other thing I'd say is like you do wonder how low res the photos are when they come out the arse end of the machine. Though,
yeah.
You know,
I was wondering.
The digital pixels are very big.
Yeah, I was wondering whether it just for the sake of it, because it's probably got a much smaller memory than a modern computer. So for the sake of saving memory, it has a much lower res image on the screen
to manipulate.
Yes. But then you can like render it up, sort of get it in, finer detail once you've finished buggering about with it, sort of thing. I was wondering whether that was the case. Otherwise, those photos would be unusable, wouldn't they? If they really were that.
they would.
They really were that blocky.
Yeah. It's good stuff, Dave.
Yeah. Oh, and our first recognisable piece of music. Although it took me a long time to recognise it at the beginning of this segment, I'm pretty sure it's an orchestral version of the song "Button Up Your Overcoat."
Yeah.
I couldn't find out who that particular.
I assume it's the same band who did the theme tune to Big Break. It has the same production values.
But first published in 1928, Mark, that song.
Ooh.
So that's an old one, I suppose.
Yeah.
Is it meant to, I don't know, is that conveying anything?
Take good care of yourself, you belong to me. That's the famous line.
No.
This isn't Holmes and the Hammer, Russ.
No, that's a good point.
Not everything has to be taken literal.
No. Oh, maybe we should start a Holmes Under the Hammer podcast.
Oh, what do we call it? Hammer time with Russ? Let's workshop this, Russ. Let's do it during the next segment.
Victorian women of beauty and influence all had one thing in common: a smooth, lily-white skin. So an exotic parasol, to keep off the sun, was an essential part of their exotic summer wardrobes. How things have changed. Today, far from a delicate complexion being the indication of wealth and sensuality, an all-year tan is now the ultimate in status symbols. But getting that ideal tan can be dangerous. We now know, for example, that there's a connection between skin cancer and long exposure to the sun. So now it's back to the parasol again. But this time, Not a parasol to keep you white, but to help you tan more safely by cutting out the dangerous band of ultraviolet light called UVB, which burns and causes skin cancer, but allowing through UVA, which is safer provided you don't overdo it. So we decided to test the material using a machine called a spectrophotometer. Light from a lamp inside this section is passed through the sample here. The light scans across the spectrum, and this plotter records how much of each band gets through the material. You can see from the graph that we've just made on the machine that virtually no UVB gets through, and it starts to allow UVA light through here. So it's not surprising that this parasol has proved to be safe in tests carried out by the Institute of Dermatology. But sun worshippers will pay a price for that safety, because the amount of UVA light getting through here is so low, it's been estimated that even at the height of summer, it could take up to 100 hours to get a tan under this parasol. So perhaps the sooner we go back to pale Victorian standards of beauty, the better.
I bet you wish we went back to pale Victorian standards of beauty, don't you, Mark? Your complexion.
What do you mean, my complexion? I don't think it counts as. I don't think the word complexion is accurate. It is the absence of complexion. Yeah. No, as somebody who is pale and of pale stock, unlike you, obviously you're Romany blood running through you. You got that wonderful David Essex leathery skin that everyone loves. I did find the framing of this segment to be slightly uncomfortable for a couple of reasons. One, the first thing was that the reason lily white skin was so valued by Victorian Britain was because it reinforced the idea. It was basically as classist. It reinforced the idea that those who were wealthy, who didn't need to work in the fields or indeed work in kind of, sweaty, dank, dark mills, could show their wealth by being pale and having good skin, and it was kind of reinforced their wealth and the fact that they were removed from the reality of working life for so many people. The other thing is, I just kind of like, it does seem to kind of, not deliberately, because obviously I'm projecting contemporary values in an old thing, but like again, that idea of lily white skin and staying white does kind of come from a time that maybe the European complexion was elevated above literally anything else, and for me, it's a bit of a rare duff note from Tomorrow's World, who I think in general tend to be very good at framing those segments. Yeah. And actually, why they go with the vanity angle, I don't know, because to me it's a complete miss. Like, it would have been equally as valid, or no, it would have been more valid rather, to go with the public health angle of protecting yourself in the sun. But actually, it's one of the very rare times I've been disappointed by the editors of Tomorrow's World at the time, because I know one of our TW tropes is kind of casual sexism, but in general, I think they're actually pretty. They normally get their values pretty decently spot on, don't they? And I didn't like this. Full stop.
No.
That didn't mean I didn't love bits. Obviously, I love the way Judith Hann pronounces the word parasol.
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 And she says it so many times. She says it over and over and over again, like she's trying to brainwash me in some way. Like, parasol.
she's trying to gaslight you.
I don't know. I wonder where she got that pronunciation from. She's chosen.
She's been hanging around. No, she's been hanging around Sue Ingle
How do you
too long,
think?
because we know, because Sue gloriously. I'm happy for Sue to mispronounce or kind of misemphasize words as she does later on. But parasol really began to bug me in what is quite a short segment.
Yeah, and this is easily the most rubbish invention of the segment, because if it was what I think you are led to believe it's going to be at the beginning of the segment, a parasol that gets you tanned without getting you burned.
Yeah, doesn't do that.
Then I could see why it would be an interesting invention.
Yeah, absolutely. Or equally, I was like, if the idea is that actually it's a parasol that protects you from the UV rays, it's like, well, that's great, but like you have to walk to the parasol. So if it was actually about material, like UV blocking material, and that they were going to make clothes out of this, that would be interesting. But it's this obsession with the parasol and beauty that just like it has gone down a complete kind of cul-de-sac, isn't it?
Yeah. And turns out all it is it's just basically an umbrella, really. I mean, it's a big
umbrella, yeah.
Pretty standard umbrella that just blocks light. And I think you'd have to sit under it for 100 hours for it to have any appreciable
She
tanning
said,
effect
yeah.
on you.
Yeah.
By which time I imagine your holiday would be long over.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of it that way, Riz. And obviously, because obviously, if you have to be 100 hours in daytime, add another 50 or 60 at night, you're going to have to sleep out there, aren't you? So
yeah. That's absolute nonsense.
well, I suppose unless you're in Norway,
That's a good
unless
point,
you do your summer holiday in Norway, yeah.
That's a good point.
It is rubbish, this, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, I've looked into ultraviolet light, skin cancer, things like that. Turns out that although UVA is less dangerous than UVB, it still is considered these days to be dangerous in that you're better off not exposing yourself to it. So any sort of invention that let one type through and not the other, I would probably be pretty frowned upon. So that wouldn't exist in this day, like these days. So I don't think this ever actually took off anyway. So yeah, there's also UVC rays, but luckily, thank God, Mark, we've got the ozone layer, so that stops them coming through. Because if we didn't have the ozone layer, we'd all be absolutely covered in melanomas before before you could say anything. But skin cancer.
But I thought radiation was tasty and enjoyable.
Well, this isn't delicious gamma radiation.
No,
like
I
Judith had
suppose.
earlier.
Yeah.
This is UV radiation, completely different.
Yeah.
But skin cancer is the most popular type of cancer, unsurprisingly, because you can just get it by being outside. But
Did you say popular?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it would. If you're going to get cancer, it's probably the best one to get because it has the highest survivability rates.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I was just thinking in terms of popularity, it would be like lung cancer because of social smokers. But
40% of all cancer is skin cancer, but it has an 86% survival rate in the UK.
Okay,
Do you know, though, Mark? Have a guess.
Yeah.
What country has by far the highest rate of skin cancer?
I'm assuming it's a country where people are pale, and it's I would think the Nordic countries where they have 24-hour sun for half the year and they're all made of paper. So Norway?
No, it begins with N, Mark. It's New Zealand.
Is it New Zealand? Oh, do you know what? Actually, you're not wrong. When we were there, we were there over December a few years ago. Yeah, actually, the sun really burns. Like you go out without any sunblock on, and it actually feels like your skin is about to cook. Yeah. It was astonishing.
Yeah, the UV light there. The UV light there is up to 40% stronger than similar countries in the northern hemisphere. And they reckon it's like a few different things. It's because the angle of the sun. It's because the ozone layer is thinner on the southern hemisphere because all those CFCs that we used to tuck into, and there's far less pollution as well. And pollution's actually quite good at blocking UV light. So because they're victims of their own cleanliness there. And New Zealanders tend to spend a lot of time outside, and bungee jumping and whatever else they do, and they're all quite pasty. Apart from obviously the native ones who are slightly less pasty, but yeah. So much higher skin cancer than anybody else. You need to, if you want to stop getting skin cancer, you want to block all UV light. You don't just want to block one type. So you can get parasols these days. The ultraviolet light protection factor, UPF, which is how sunblock and things are rated. I always wondered what the number on that meant. Do you know what the number on that means? You get a factor 20 or factor 50 or that.
Well, I mean, I know what it means in the scale sense, but no, I don't know what it's based on.
So what it means is factor 20 means that it only allows through 1/20th of the light, and factor 50 only allows through 1/50th of the light. So 1/50th of 100 is 2. So it means it blocks 98% of all light.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So that's how it works. So there you go. You can now work out how much whenever you're slapping on some suntan lotion, work out how much you're blocking. But
yeah, absolutely. It's more a reflection of people put on factor 20 so they actually get a tan.
Yeah.
And it's and yet you're only letting through a tiny minuscule amount of
yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Getting sunburnt just once every 2 years can triple your chances of getting a melanoma. So, slap on that factor 50 mark. But yeah, you get yourself a parasol. And that's rated higher than any sunblock is, because obviously it's a physical thing. You get a factor 55 parasol, which means it blocks basically, I think 99% of all lights. But that'll cost you £55 on Amazon, one of those. So
Ooh.
£1 for every factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good. That's handy. Easy to remember.
Yeah, but there's no such thing. I could not find any sort of parasol that you could sit under for 100 hours and get safely tanned. That doesn't seem to exist at all. So Judith's invention here is absolute garbage.
Well then, anything else to say, Russ?
Parasol?
Garbage. Yeah, let's move on.
Windscale in Cumbria, the home of Britain's nuclear reprocessing. Shortly before 11 a.m. on 26th September 1973, there'd been a leak of radioactive gas. It was from this building, an experimental plant for reprocessing one kind of spent fuel, oxide fuel. It was closed immediately, and 35 of these men's colleagues had radioactive contamination. The building to this day is closed. Yet the Japanese and other nations are constantly sending us their oxide waste for reprocessing. And under contract, we've got to accept it. All we can do is take it to Windscale for stockpiling. But on this site at Windscale, they're going to build a new plant for reprocessing oxide fuel. And to ensure that it's safer than the last, they've been researching into the cause of the 1973 leak. The problem there arose in the first step of reprocessing, where spent fuel rods are dissolved in nitric acid. The snag is that these alloys form. They're radioactive wastes which are insoluble in the acid, and that can lead to problems later on. A suspension forms which can affect the next stage of reprocessing, and that's probably what happened that morning at Windscale. The solids accumulated and then reacted with the acids, giving off radioactive gases which eventually leaked into the atmosphere. So it's essential to separate insoluble radioactive waste from dissolved spent fuel if reprocessing is to continue successfully. And up to now, that's not been easy. But remembering that the insoluble alloys are weakly magnetic, British Nuclear Fuels decided to try something here at Winfrith in Dorset. Using this magnetic powder, they built an experimental model to take solids out of a mixture. Over here is a suspension of the powder, and it goes through a system of tubes ending up in a very narrow glass tube. You can just see it running vertically, right in the centre. The idea is to take the solids out of the mixture using these powerful magnets on either side. When the main magnet is switched on, the magnetic effect is concentrated into an iron wire running down the middle of the vertical glass tube. As the mixture flows through, the black powder is attracted to the iron wire and so separated from the solution. The same would happen, they reasoned, with the magnetic nuclear wastes. And they would stay there until the main magnet is switched off. The wire would cease to be magnetic, and the radioactive waste could simply be flushed through and collected separately. After the success of this model, they built a larger prototype, using gold-plated ball bearings in place of the thin iron wire. To represent the nuclear waste, they used green chromium oxide in suspension. It's also weakly magnetic, just like the radioactive waste they hoped to separate out. To test it, the magnet is switched on, and the chromium oxide allowed to pass through the gold ball bearings. If it works, the liquid at the bottom should be completely clear. The process is so efficient that the end result is as pure as drinking water. Or so they say. Well, it looks all right. Even smells quite clean. And it tastes like drinking water.
I can only imagine how much Judith's stomach was rumbling at the sight of all those radioactive materials in that segment, Mark. It's a veritable smorgasbord of radioactivity there to tuck into, wasn't it?
All the all the fixings.
Yeah, Windscale, Mark. A name that conjures up nothing but bleakness and nuclear accidents in the mind, isn't it? It's not a name that you can trust. I can see why they eventually
They did rebadge
it, you fool. Yeah. Well, and Sue's explaining to us how they're going to try to avoid irradiating their staff in future with this new exciting way of stopping what sounds like a very easily avoidable nuclear accident.
I mean, this whole segment begs a lot of questions, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
To say the least. It's absolutely... Actually, I suppose the thing I found most reassuring was that even in 1981, the name Windscale conjured such misery and bleakness into the mind of the Tomorrow's World staff and no doubt the audience, that the stock footage we get is like grayscale. It is silhouetted. The bleak power station is silhouetted, and they ADR in the sound effect of wind blowing. Which we've not had a while. Wind, right at the beginning of our podcast, Russ, as loyal listeners will know, wind was surprisingly one of the great enemies of British progress. So for me, it's we're celebrating the return of an old friend. Yeah, the advances of Windscale are not being celebrated here whatsoever.
It sounded to me like the wind that would blow across a post-apocalyptic landscape, I think.
Absolutely.
Also, with the sort of the visuals there, I think the sort of the World in Action theme tune would be very suited to that. It's I mean, this episode in general is very beige. I feel like maybe 1981 has consistently been the most depressing looking year of any of our.
I'm gonna steal an observation from our good friends / the people we homage at Chart Music, who always make the point that we associate certain kind of fashion and cultural imagery with the decade they're from, when the reality is, for the vast majority of people, they were doing it 5 years later. And this is like this looks 70s, but it's not. It's 1981 because that's how, it's like, it's quite astonishing. Like, you associate 1981 with like reds, blacks, whites, and kind of maybe a little bit of neon. It's like, no, it's the 70s.
But it's it's like the bleakest, most colour washed parts of the 70s, isn't it? There's there's none of the bright colours of disco.
No, nothing like that at all. No.
Yeah, and this bleak grey landscape, and towards the beginning as well, she talks about how 35 members of staff got irradiated in this accident in 1973, and then it shows 5 or 6 of the Windscale workers walking down the driveway of the facility. And I don't believe that anybody looking at that film would believe that they are men who work in a high-tech, highly dangerous nuclear reprocessing plant. They look like off-duty dustmen.
they to be honest, they look like they're on the way to the
It's amazing. So it's no wonder there's been so Windscale's having nuclear incidents every 3 weeks or whatever it is. It's like I'm not sure some of these people that work here have necessarily got all of the qualifications to be doing this.
Well, it seems like they've made some very basic errors.
Yeah. So the error here, as Sue explains, and when I sort of looked into it, her explanation is pretty much bang on. Is that the reprocessing facility there takes spent fuel rods from around the world, and in order to reprocess the nuclear fuel that's contained within them into new nuclear fuel, they dissolve the uranium and plutonium in nitric acid. But the problem is that the rods have an alloy coating on them, which doesn't dissolve in acid. And in this case, what happened was that there was a build-up of this undissolved alloy, and the alloy reacts and got hot and basically caused a gas cloud, like a radioactive gas cloud, to escape from the facility, and they had to shut it down, and it remained shut forever more after that. But you just wonder, you just think, at what point did no one go, right, we're going to do this process where we chuck radioactive fuel rods into acid? We really desperately, definitely need to check to make sure that nothing bad is going to happen when we do that. You would think that they would have done extensive tests beforehand, wouldn't you?
So like on the one side of things, it's kind of inspiring that British industry just trusted whatever charlatan came along and said, hey, let's just wing it. And they're like, yeah, go on then. On the other hand, it's like this segment from Sue, I think goes at great pains to show how they've learned from that error, and they are slowly and methodically scaling up their new proposal for waste processing. It started off with a very simple experiment, and then there was one the size of a room, and now they're building a third experiment at scale, at Windscale, at scale, to prove that it works and nothing goes wrong. And all I could think of was like, why did no one do this first time round? It sounds like somebody went from like a secondary school science lab to immediately building a massive building in Windscale without any stage in between, because it strikes me that surely because they even show us, like she shows us a really simple experiment with obviously slightly different materials, and it's like no one did that. It really felt like they built it, pressed play, and then
stood back.
Yeah, it's incredible. No?
Yeah.
Is that not incredible?
Yeah. I mean,
it does make you wonder, to go back to your point about the men in the donkey jackets, was no scientist allowed to do this because of strict union rules?
Probably. It was just probably men in donkey jackets with hacksaws, just chopping these rods up.
Yeah, true, yeah.
Actually, when I was watching this, I was thinking, I wouldn't mind a donkey jacket, actually.
They do look warm, don't they?
Yeah. I was quite interested, like, Windscale, because it's synonymous with nuclear accident, and I was interested. Where does obviously me and you, as previous episodes will attest, huge fans of nuclear accidents, aren't we? I mean, we
go on then. Yeah. And I wouldn't say fanatics, more aficionados.
Real nuclear accident aficionados. And so I was just wondering, where does this rank in the? Because obviously, famously, there was a thing called the Windscale fire in 1957, and so there were these two things called the Windscale piles, and they'd been built in the late 40s. And they weren't for generating power or anything like that. They were made purely. They had reactors in them, but the reactors were just there to convert uranium into plutonium, so we could build our own atom bombs without having to rely on the Americans. So that's what these two piles were there, and they were meant to only run for 5 years. We kept them running for 7 years, so they.
Oh, of course.
So
gotta get your money's
exactly
worth.
Get your money's worth. So in the end, one of them became unstable and caught fire, and it released a load of radioactive material into the atmosphere, which then drifted across Europe, radiated, Scandinavia and some of the Low Countries as well. So it turns out that the International Atomic Energy Agency has its own rating system for nuclear accidents, Mark. It goes up to 7. And obviously, there's only ever been 2 sevens, Mark. Our old friend Chernobyl and Fukushima.
Yes. Yep.
But Windscale comes in at a very respectable 5 out of 7 on the.
Oh, that is very impressive.
So it's actually regarded as the 4th most damaging nuclear accident of all time. The third one is a Russian one I've never heard of before called Kishtim, which got a rating of 6. So that was in the middle of nowhere in Russia in the late 50s.
I was about to say, how come you and I have never been to Kishtim?
I think it's a Siberia or somewhere like that. But that was a pretty bad accident, but not particularly well known. And do you want to know what's just after Windscale, hanging in there at number 5 in the charts, also with a rating of 5?
The only other one I can think of off the top of my head is it 3 Mile
Island? Done, 3 Mile Island. Yes, yeah. But that's regarded as slightly less bad as Windscale because they can find no deaths connected to 3 Mile Island whatsoever.
Yeah. Do you hear that, Americans? Shove it.
Yeah. Whereas Windscale, they reckon probably caused a few cases of leukemia or something like that. So,
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So Windscale, as I said, it was originally built to make weapons-grade plutonium, and then they expanded it from there. They thought, well, we've got all this nuclear stuff here now, so we might as well just expand the nuclear facilities here because this whole place is radioactive now anyway, and there's not really it's in Cumbria, so it's probably one of the safer places you can have this sort of stuff. Although apparently the Irish aren't particularly happy about it because it.
No, they've not been for since ever.
But yeah, so they expanded it. So the first ever commercial nuclear power station was there, which I didn't realise. I didn't realise that was the British had the first ever commercial nuclear power station. So yeah, it was called Calder Hall, and that generated electricity.
Yeah, the Queen opened it
from
didn't she?
1956 until 2003.
Oh,
So yeah.
getting his money's worth. Once again, there you
yeah,
go.
but exactly. But the thing is, it does seem like certainly, definitely in the Windscale years, this site they were just so many minor accidents and leaks and things like that, and they forever just releasing stuff into the atmosphere or into the Irish Sea when they shouldn't be doing it. They reckon that between 1950 and 2000, there were 21 different serious incidents at the plant, which got a rating on the out of 7 scale. And they 21 different incidents. Yeah. So
I'm assuming the target should be 0.
yeah. Do you think go back to The Simpsons? Do they think they've got that so many days without an accident readout sort of thing?
I don't suppose you know what the cumulative IAEA scale score is for these.
I mean, obviously the fire was was highest at number 5. There's quite a lot of 3s, 2s, 3s, and 4s though. So
still does seem a lot. Doesn't it?
They're quite apparently in the 50s, back when when it was mostly them just trying to build bombs and stuff. They were a lot more blasé, and they were just happily releasing like stuff into the atmosphere willy nilly, and they reckon that there's around 200 kilos of plutonium dumped in the Irish Sea over the years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that seems like
a lot
more than there should be.
The interesting thing about the place is that for many, many years, only the British and the French ever got into this whole idea of reprocessing nuclear fuel. Mm-hmm. Nobody else would touch it. Not even the Americans would touch it. Like they were just going, we're not importing this stuff. But for some reason, we thought it was a great idea. And obviously, Sue touches on it here because she makes out that we're somehow being forced by the Japanese.
We've been tricked by Johnny Foreigner. Yeah,
yeah,
that made me laugh.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're being forced to contractually accept this waste at huge expense to them and no doubt great profit to us. How rude!
Yeah.
It's not our fault that we can't do it because we fucked up.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
Amazing.
But it was doing my head in about the sort of the economics of this, because there is money to be made, but I don't know whether it's worth it.
Mm.
So she says that they're building this new facility, this new reprocessing facility, and I found out that it really was built. They ended up being called the Thorp, THORP.
I recognise that name.
Which is the thermal oxide reprocessing plant. So they got the go-ahead in 1978, and it took them until 1994 to build it.
Wow.
It cost £1.8 billion to build, right?
And old money.
All
wow.
Right. Actually, but it didn't start operation until 1997. So I don't know what they did for 3 years, just hung around, not testing things maybe. It then ran until November 2018, at which point it had completed all of its reprocessing contracts. So between those, what's that, 21 years.
Was it, did you say 2014, 2018?
Yeah, 97 to 2018. Yeah, so 21 years.
Yeah.
It processed 9,500 tons of nuclear fuel from 9 different countries. Then they just stopped. They just, right, that's it. That's its job done, closing it down. They will now have to leave it until 2075 at the earliest for the radioactivity to be low enough for them to start working on it. And then they will spend 20 years decommissioning it at a cost of, at 2018 prices, £4 billion. And they reckon that the amount of money they made processing the stuff was probably about £9 billion. So when you add it all up, I mean, it's doing a lot of work, and they're basically earning about the same amount as Avatar 1 and 2. I don't know. It just doesn't. I don't really understand the economics of that, really, considering the amount of damage that it does.
I agree. Yeah, like it obviously you wouldn't have had a profit, but by not doing it, we could have just sold it. Actually, probably would have been cheaper to send our waste to what other rubes are doing
the French.
The French. Yeah, we'd have been chuckling into our fists, wouldn't we? Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, there's no bigger fan of nuclear power than me, Mark. But reading some of this stuff, even I was starting to waver in my enthusiasm. But I just think maybe Windscale / Sellafield is just a particularly badly run nuclear facility.
It does sound like that. To be honest, I know Windscale is a bad name, but I didn't grow up thinking that Sellafield was like the gold standard.
No. They seem to be running it more like a scrapyard than a nuclear power plant or a nuclear facility. I mean, there was another massive leak in 2004. It leaked for 9 months and they didn't notice.
Oh,
even though 20
on.
tons of uranium leaked out because it was all dissolved in the acid. So yeah, it's 20 tons of dissolved uranium and 160 kilos of plutonium.
And the acid?
And the acid. Yeah, it was dissolved in the acid. So yeah.
So it wasn't just like uranium sleeping. It was like acidic uranium leaking out.
Luckily, they had like
Yeah.
a second containment area that it leaked into, so it didn't actually get out of the plant.
Great.
But they
they
didn't notice 20 tons of uranium was missing for 9 months, which I think is pretty impressive.
I'm glad someone had the foresight to realise that no one there understood their job, so they built in fail-safes that were then ignored. I assume there was a third pit it could have leaked into.
Yeah.
That is slapdash.
It is, isn't it? Sue's quite excited by this new invention. So her thing is, weirdly, this takes us all back to episode 1 of the podcast, Mark. In episode 1 of the podcast, we had Michael Rodd explaining how to clean out a nuclear reactor using magnetism. And it was still to this day one of the most boring segments we've ever witnessed. Little do we know that Michael Rodd would become such a hero to us.
Who would have envisaged? Not us.
But interestingly, this thing that Sue is once again in 1981 demonstrating how to clean a nuclear reactor using magnets. That's what's going on here, isn't it? She's because the offending alloy that they want to take out of the acid is slightly magnetic. So their idea is to have what she calls a ennoir.
Oh, I love this. Oh, Sue always brings her A game, doesn't it? Yeah, I actually had no idea what she was talking about.
Worked out that she's trying to say iron wire. Yeah. So they magnetize that. They've got a magnetic field running through an iron wire, and that's sitting in the liquid, and all of the offending oil will stick to that rather than going through to the rest of the processing stage. So hopefully that means that there won't be any explosions in the future or releases or anything untoward happening in the plant. But yeah, so this seems like a really great idea. However, I couldn't find any evidence that they ever used it, fortunately. But so I tried, obviously couldn't find any schematics of what Thorpe ended up being like. But it seems like, from like descriptions of it that I could find, that actually what they used instead was a centrifuge. Because if you're they're just trying to get a solid out of a liquid. That's all they need to do. So the magnet is sort of overcomplicating things, really. All they need to do is just either wait for it to settle at the bottom of a tank or spin the tank and take it out that way. So I think that's probably what they ended up doing in the end. But yeah, there weren't any more accidents of this nature. So they did solve the problem, but not necessarily in the way that Sue is suggesting, I don't think.
Okay. Well, that'll probably explain why it took so long to build then, because they were spending time perfecting it and reinventing it, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't realise this, actually. At the moment, there is no currently any industries at Sellafield that are anything other than them trying to decommission all the things that they were already there. See what I mean? So
yeah,
EDF and Rolls-Royce are planning to possibly put some new reactors there in the future, but they haven't done that yet. So at the moment, the only thing that's happened...
Oh, are these new mini ones?
Yes, Rolls-Royce's mini ones. Yeah,
I
think they're called SMRs, maybe? Or is that ASMR? No, they're reactors that talk to you nicely.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm quite interested by those mini ones because I think that's quite a good idea. The idea of...
Yeah,
reminds me slightly of the computer game Fallout.
Fusion. Oh, yeah.
But at the moment, the only thing they're doing is decommissioning. And do you know when they think they will have finished decommissioning the whole Sellafield site, Mark?
Well, I mean, if the Thorpe is, would you say, 2075, and that takes 20 years, it'll be 2095. I'm assuming that can't be the final thing. So, but by decommissioning, do they genuinely mean that like nothing left is radioactive? Because I know they have buried stuff there with half-lives of years.
No, I don't know. I couldn't really.
Or is it like the fabric of the buildings that we're talking about here? Do you think?
I guess the site can be used for other things. Maybe I guess it's that
Okay.
decommissioned, or you can put a children's
suppose.
playground on there?
I remember a program. Do you remember there was a program about industrial design years ago, and one of the topics put to the designers was, if something has a half-life of 10,000 years, how do you protect future generations when language will have moved on and changed in a way that you can't imagine? And they were trying to think like what statements can you make that kind of convey the danger? And it was things like they kind of came to the conclusion that genuinely there was no sign you could make that wouldn't be lost in translation in some way, because who knows why. Yeah. So the plan was you basically tarmac the whole thing in like black obsidian that heated up even, at such high temperatures that you couldn't go on it. And that would be a symbol that whatever was underneath it, it wasn't so amazing that you should be digging. And that was like 10,000 years. So, on the one hand, I want to say 30005, but I'm guessing, like, realistically, I don't know, 2150?
2120, they reckon.
Oh, okay.
And they reckon it will cost them a total of £121 billion.
Gosh, what a bargain.
That estimate has consistently increased over the years.
Of course it has.
So God knows what it'll be by 2120.
Well, I plan to be around to find out, Russ.
Oh, and also there was another scandal in 2007 when it turned out they'd been illegally removing the organs of dead workers without their permission.
Do you know, I do remember that. Jesus, what is up with them?
The more I hear about this place, the more I don't like it, Mark.
Bloody hell. I'm surprised they haven't tapped us up for a job. Sounds like anyone can get in.
Well, we're not Cumbrian, Mark. It employs 10,000 Cumbrians. That's got to be basically the whole population of Cumbria, isn't it, really?
Well, a sizable portion, I suppose.
I mean, if you're Cumbrian, what you could do, you either work there or work in the Beatrix Potter Museum or make Kendall mint cake. Pencil Museum as well. There you go. There's your four main employers up there, I would have thought.
Is Kendall in Cumbria?
Yeah, Kendall mint cake.
I don't know. Yeah, okay, cool. Don't think I've ever been to Cumbria.
Oh, it's very nice.
Thank God. That's why I feel so healthy. Can't we nearly there, Russ? We can do this.
Are you one of the lucky people who bought a new car recently, or one of the unlucky ones? Because do you know where your car was stored after leaving the factory? Was it, for instance, here at Dover? Or maybe it was one of these at Poole? Was it in a field of grass at Radlett Aerodrome? Or was it up to its vitals in water at Southampton Docks? These pictures are just a selection from next month's Car magazine, which claims that there are around 450,000 unsold cars stockpiled all around the country. Of course, most new cars have anti-corrosion treatment and a special protective wax coating, because it's normal to stockpile cars for a few weeks. But can that protect a car from this sort of treatment? Would you pay £4,500 for a car if you knew that it had been kept like this? Look at where the water level comes on this one, all the way up to the middle of the hubcap. Now, what harm could that do? Well, the AA's chief engineer told us that the whole brake system may need reconditioning. The drive assembly and transmission could be affected, the lower part of the exhaust system could begin to rust, water could seep past the seals and shorten the life of electrical components. Some damage might not show until well after the warranty period has expired. Well, all right, this car is an exceptional case, and in fact, this site was abandoned a few days ago. But the problem of long-term storage of cars in unsuitable places is one for the whole industry, as well as a consumer. The AA told us that no car should be kept under conditions where water can collect. Yet thousands of cars from many of the major car manufacturers have been kept for months on end on grass, in salt spray atmospheres, even in marshy conditions. Of course, all cars are checked over before they reach the showroom, but even the dealer might not know how old the car is or the dreadful conditions it's been kept in. So, as the stockpile increases and the demand for cars falls, what can we, the consumers, do? Well, the advice from the AA is check for dampness, check for rust. Our advice is, if you're not sure, get an expert to look at it. In other words, treat your potential new car just like a second-hand one. Mike.
Where's Lynn Folds Wood when you need her, Mark?
Absolutely.
One of the most Tomorrow's World segments I remember seeing. It has no scientific or technological sort of merit whatsoever. It's just a consumer briefing about the dangers of cars being stockpiled in water.
It's so odd,
Yeah.
isn't it? It is so peculiar. I mean, it really is like something from Watchdog or That's Life. And you know it's different because Kieran has taken off his jovial celebratory outfit of shenanigans from the top of the episode when he was standing in the white void, and now he's put on his beige suit of seriousness and standing in the black abyss as he tells us, he lectures us on buying new cars. It's really weird. I don't know how much there is to say about this, except that one of the most on Tomorrow's World things we've ever watched.
Yeah, totally. It did immediately make me think of Michael Rodd's Mini Metro and the fact that he wasn't getting his rust proofed at the time. So I wonder how they would stand up it.
More fool him. Yeah. But at least that was about the proving grounds, wasn't it? It was about how they batter cars.
Yeah. But I mean, look, it's obviously this is to do with car imports though, which is why they're all around Dover and places like that. So these are all cars manufactured by Johnny Foreigner, Mark. Obviously, I'm sure you noticed that there is a Lancia Beta there, the Fiat 126, Renault 5.
Obviously. I definitely saw the Renault 5 because my gran had one of those.
And
interestingly, they have painted out the Renault logo so that you don't know what it is.
Yeah. But then kept the Renault logo on the diagram that they use.
The diagram, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, they use a diagram to demonstrate a car in water, and that's clearly got a Renault badge on it. Interestingly, that first car, that big field of cars they first showed, the Lancia Betas, that's a quite a good choice there, because Lancia Betas were like the most famously rusty cars of all time. They would literally dissolve like plutonium in nitric acid, and there's none of them left. There were none of them left after about 3 weeks of them not being in the market, and that's why you can't buy a Lancia in Britain anymore, because their reputation became so tarnished by how rusty their Lancias got that they just stopped selling them in Britain. So it's quite interesting. They chose that as their opening image there, Mark. So I think it's about the only interesting thing I could pull out of this segment, really.
It's interesting. I wrote 3 lines and I ended it with the phrase, "It's interesting enough, but not a Tomorrow's World segment." Yeah. And God bless you, Russ. You couldn't help yourself, could you? And then at one point I was thinking, like, he's not even really telling me this anymore. He's just kind of telling himself this.
Why are they stockpiling them, Mark? Well, it's because of the way that manufacturing works. It's cheap.
It's about to say
it's cheaper to keep the factory running and have leftover cars than it is to stop the factory, because
I mean, how expensive would a bespoke car be exactly? Quite expensive, I would imagine.
Yeah. So that's why they do it. I mean, actually, the manufacturers are pretty good at avoiding this. It only happens when there's a sudden economic downturn that they weren't expecting. So I mean, the last time that there was this happened on a big scale was in 2009. Obviously after the
credit crunch.
You rarely hear the phrase credit crunch now, do you? They don't
I have to say, I use it every Christmas. I do, yeah. Credit crunch Christmas. No, you don't. You really don't, actually. Yeah, it's. I know people haven't forgotten it, but it's almost like the reasons behind it have been forgotten. But along with the toxic asset default swap or whatever it was.
Yeah, but in a very timely fashion, Mark, just 7 days ago, UBS analysts said that we're about to go into another. Like, we're going to get them stockpiled again, because what's happened, obviously, the pandemic. All of the plants were shut down temporarily.
Yeah,
there was suddenly a much greater demand for cars because there was no supply. So then, once everything got back to normal, all the car plants ramped up production, and UBS is pretty sure that they've all overproduced. So they reckon that this year they're going to make globally 85.8 million cars globally.
Wow,
still a lot. There's a lot of cars.
That's so many cars.
But they predict that only 81 million of them will actually be sold, which means there's going to be 4.8 million cars sitting, on the tarmac in various places, unsold.
That's an SB factor of about 15 then, is it?
Yeah. But obviously, good thing is these days, rust proofing of cars is absolutely brilliant. So there won't be any of them, dissolving away like a Lancia Beta. You're going to be okay. They'll probably be able to sit there, especially the electric ones, because there's hardly any moving parts, so they can sit around for ages. Just
yeah, true. Yeah. Because electric things, they love.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's our favorite thing. The only other thing I want to say is, I don't know do you have any more car chat?
No.
You sure? You promise? Pinky promise. I don't want to feel like I'm rushing you. I know how important it is for you to get this out of your system.
Yeah, no.
Great. The only other thing is like to hammer home how un Tomorrow's World this is and how much like a That's Life or Watchdog segment this is. I think again, possibly for the first time, there's an actual handover from one presenter to another.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, he turns and says Mike, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. And then very That's Lifey hands over to what can only be described as a Horlicks of excitement. That sucks all the seriousness out. Yeah, which is because again, I know you noticed it in the notes as well. But it's like the more I thought about it, the more I really don't instantly recall one presenter finishing his sentence and then throwing over by saying the name of the next one, which feels like a very newsy thing to do, a very kind of consumer program thing to do.
Yeah, weird. Maybe it's just somebody at the BBC just decided that this information needed to get to the public, and this, for whatever reason, this week's Tomorrow's World was the only vector by which they could get the information out.
I mean, it was
they couldn't put it on Tomorrow's.
BBC
They couldn't put it on
Thursday.
Top of the Pops, could they? So I mean,
well, no, no, but I'm sure all the kids tuning in would be delighted. But it's like, I mean, I'm sure, like 8-9 million people were watching this.
Yeah.
If they weren't, busy circling their radio times, they were listening in, weren't they? So yeah, I mean, I get it, but it's just like that's not what this show's for, though.
No.
Now, if he told us about how in the future all car storage depots would be hover storage depots,
yeah,
then I'm in. But he's not. So next.
Well, and before we go into this next piece, just want everybody at home quickly grab yourself a pencil and a piece of paper.
Please, yes, absolutely.
Because it goes quite quickly, but you're going to have to need to take notes, and I will be marking everyone's papers at the end.
No calculators. We want to see you working out.
So yeah, okay, here we go. Listen hard.
Let's go.
Well, after that, let's look forward to Easter, which this year falls on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. We can be certain of that, because it always does. But the date on which that occurs once taxed mathematicians sorely. In fact, centuries ago, a formula was derived to check the date of Easter each year without having to resort to the almanac. And that formula can be expressed like this. A numerical value is given to each of the letters spelling Easter. Wow. But fear not, Tomorrow's World and a calculator will help you through. In fact, capital E to start the letter doesn't need a calculator at all, does it? Because it says the year, take away 1900, answer 81. So let's put that up on this frame over here and move on to the second line, because we'll see that each of the answers is now dependent on the year. A, for instance, is the remainder left when you divide big E by 19. I think it's calculator time. 19 times 4, for the sake of argument, is 76. 81 take away 76, remainder 5. That goes in for A. On we go to S, which is 7A. That's 35 plus 1, 36, divided by 19, ignoring the fractions. 19, just in case you don't believe me, by 2 is 38, which is more than 36. So in this case, for 1981, the answer to S is 1. And on we would go. You see why it was developed centuries ago. T for 81 has a 0 value. E comes to 20, and R ends up at 6. Now, where's that got us? Well, look at our original formula. Easter is in any year 25, take away T, take away R. So in this case of 1981, it is 25, take away 0, which is 25, take away R, which is 6. The answer is 19. Check your diaries if you like, but this year Easter falls on the 19th of April. What you say would have happened if the total had come out negative? Well, the baseline for this formula is 31st of March. Positive 19 is 19 days into April. A negative answer would be so many days back into March. It works for any year. But all you aficionados of the electronic calculator will be saying, that is an awfully tortuous way of going about it. Isn't there anything quicker? Well, yes, there is. This is the very latest in programmable calculators. And spread round about it are just a few of the hundreds of programs it can deal with. Computer codes,
today's complicated formulae. Let's look at this page, which is actually concerned with religious holidays. One quick trip across the barcodes with the wand will program this new unit with all the information it needs to carry out the calculation we've just looked at, and many more. Now, let's put this in just the right angle for you to be able to share the excitement at home. There's the display. It says, what's the year? 1981. What's the holiday? Easter we're looking for. Remember how long it took to do this the last time? It thinks, it confirms it's Easter, and in 1981, lo and behold, April the 19th is the date. So the machine and I and the formula of the ancients all agree. We'll be back, of course, long before Easter, 7 days from now. Until then, good night to you.
Now, Mark, it's been a long time since I attended a church service, but I think if Michael Rodd was was administering them weekly and they were like that, I'd be down there. I'd be down there. I'd be a proper regular down there.
Would you find God, Russ? Is that what you're saying?
I'd find Rod. Yes. Yeah, that is. No matter how many times I watch that, I get lost after the second calculation. He loses me, and then I just do not know what the hell is going on there.
Well, between us, I worked out why we get lost, and you worked out what he was trying to do. and I'm sure you'd have got my stage anyway. But like you did the. But can I just say, before we get to him doing the maths, can we just for our own sanity, let's break this down. what it is that we're seeing and feeling and hearing and experiencing. So Rod's in a church. He's in the Black Void set, and he's in this fake church, which is obviously very respectful. I think the first error they do is that he displays the formula that he is about to employ to work out the date of Easter. Now, before we get there, let's point out the fact that actually to work out what Easter is, you only need a actual calendar and a lunar calendar. If you have those two things, you know when Easter is, because it doesn't change. It takes a little bit of working out, but it's like everyone, these days now, if you Google Easter, you can Google it till the day the Earth ends, or the moon probably. It's like it doesn't, but that's just me being annoyed by him. So the first mistake, I think, is that they have written out the formula in a comic church font, which to my mind makes it basically unreadable.
Yeah, well, because my thing is that obviously they're using the letters of Easter as the algebraic letters, which
it is the illusion of a 6-stage formula that has, I think, 8 stages.
Yeah, but also that means they have to use E twice because there's 2 E's in Easter.
Yes, there's 2 E's. Yeah,
and the capital E that they use doesn't look like an E because it's one of those sort of very old-fashioned medieval
Gothic
type
medieval font.
E's.
Yeah.
So they immediately made what is already a very complicated looking formula more complicated and more harder to understand, both visually and verbally.
So we are, to begin with, handicapped. He also then refers to something as the big E.
Yeah.
Thirdly, so A, Easter is not actually difficult to work out. B, it's in the comedy Gothic church style. And then based on that, I tried to do the maths twice. Once, my maths is okay. I wouldn't go any further than that. I got a B in GCSE. I'm okay at it. But actually, the first time round, I tried to do it by following the formula as written. Yeah. I pressed pause and I did it, and it didn't work for me. And I thought, I'm being silly. I should do it at the same time as Rod does, because he's talking me through it, and that didn't work. And I was like, what the hell is going on? What I worked out is that, and what you probably worked out as well, Ross, is that Rod does not follow the formula.
No.
So the formula Rod is explained to us that we can all do at home, he does not follow. he errs from it really quickly. I think stage 3, he's doing his own thing to make this work. Because he says each of the answers is dependent on the year. A, for instance, is the remainder left when you divide big E by 19. I think it's calculator time. 19 times 4, for the sake of argument, is 76. 81 take away 76 is remainder 5. And I was thinking of course. Oh, hang on a minute. At no point in the formula is 19 times by anything. where is he? And I was thinking, like, where's he pulled this 4 from? Oh, I must be missing something. And then I just began to get obsessed by this phrase, for the sake of argument. I was thinking, this is maths, Rod. Who's arguing about what number? It's like, I don't, it's for the sake of, 4 for the sake of argument. It's like, what? No, not for the sake of argument. Where's the 4 come from? I thought I was going absolutely spare. You, however, have smartly worked out why he's done this.
Yeah.
So please explain, especially for those who are trying to do it along at home, what is going on here, because it does not make sense, because he is breaking his rules.
So I think Rod mentions that this is an old formula, and in my research I found out it was, because essentially what in the olden, like, the clergy needed to know when Easter was, and they didn't necessarily. Right at the beginning of Christianity, the Pope used to announce it, but then the communication lines broke down, and so they realised that they need to find a way of the clergy working it out for themselves. So they came up with this formula. So this is the formula he's using, but the formula is designed for humans to work out using old-fashioned written arithmetic, and in that, when you divide a number by another number that it won't divide into it, you have a remainder. And this formula relies on you getting a remainder from your answer. So Rod using a calculator is exactly the wrong thing to do, because calculators do not calculate a remainder. Calculators just give you a decimal fraction. If you if you divide a number into another number that doesn't go into a whole number, it will give you a fraction. So he's literally using the calculator at exactly the wrong point in the calculation. So the only way he can demonstrate getting a remainder is if he reverses the process and multiplies. So he has to know what the answer is first.
I was about to say, so he is doing maths based on knowing what the result is he needs to get to the next
exactly, yeah. Because otherwise the calculator would display a figure which would be useless for his calculation.
Correct. Which makes it therefore impossible for you to follow along.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. So, but it's the fact that he breaks out the calculator at the one point in the whole calculation where a calculator is the one thing you can't do.
He even says, I think it's calculator times, is Rod.
Yeah. It's absolute insanity. Absolutely, yeah. He could have just done an old-fashioned chalkboard. When you get the numbers and you put them on that top of that squiggly thing and then do the remainder underneath. That's what you should have done. And everyone at home would be able to follow that, because that's probably how everybody learned how to do it back then anyway, because hardly anybody had calculators back then anyway in 1981, did they really? So it's fascinating. It makes sense. It possibly makes sense if that was the calculator he was showing off. But I think the whole point of this segment is to show off the second calculator that we see at the end of the thing.
The programmable calculator,
which appears to be the only innovation in this segment. So I think that's what he's both.
It has to be a clumsy way of connecting it to the fact that I say the fact that we're Easter. It's like, actually this episode is broadcast like 3 weeks before Easter anyway, because he even says at the end that actually we'll be back next week, which is closer to Easter than this week's episode.
Oh yeah, he does, doesn't he? Yeah, because he works out it's April the 19th. This is only 26th of March, isn't it? Yeah.
We literally know what the date is. So he amusingly he says, but all you aficionados of the electronic calculator will be saying that it's an awfully torturous way of going about it, isn't it? Isn't there anything quicker? He says, as he then laboriously and slowly. Because this is the thing I didn't realize. I didn't know that I never had a programmer called. Or maybe we did. Actually, we had scientific calculators, didn't we? And I knew there were some people, some spods in our class who would be able to program. Who could do more than just make it say boobies. But this had like a little kind of pen, and he had a printed piece of paper with a kind of a barcode on. Well, I say a barcode on.
The world's longest barcode.
10 lines of barcode, and he's having to swipe this pen along these lines of barcode, and eventually it churns out. He still has to do some maths, but eventually he churns out the date. I was like, there's nothing quick about that at all, Rod. I'm so sorry. I was really confused, because I suppose I couldn't help but look and think like, well, if you miss one of those lines, do you have to start again, or does it? It's rubbish. It's rubbish, Russ.
I guess, but the thing is, a programmable calculator in 1981 is quite an impressive bit of kit. Yes,
I'd say so.
That's weirdly quite a portable way of programming that, because paper's light and flat, isn't it?
Yep.
So I guess, right, because back then it would either be, normally a computer would be connected to a tape recorder. You wouldn't want to connect your calculator up to a tape recorder, would you? That's a bit cumbersome. So I don't know. I guess maybe these giant sheets of barcode were the only sort of solution they could think
Well,
of.
you say portable, but unless you're obsessed with working out when Easter is every day, you're gonna have to carry around a book or ring binder of this.
Yeah.
One page, Russ, you're right. One page is very, very portable. Yeah. More than one page is still quite portable, but enough pages to make your programmable calculator useful is not portable anymore.
I really could watch Rod talking gibberish like this.
Yeah,
because there's absolutely there's no sort of. Do you think he was told to hurry up? Because obviously the last segment, there's a bit of a tradition for the last segment to perhaps be rushed because they prefer to run out of time than they do to having to fill time, don't they?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering whether Rod decided to skip any sort of explanation as to what he was doing after the second thing, and that is why he appears to just pull all these numbers out of his arse.
Well, I've been thinking about this, and I think the phrase "for the sake of argument" is actually, I was right to obsess about it. I think that's a bit of a giveaway, and I think, and it is both a discredit and a credit to Michael Rod. I think this whole maths thing is way outside his wheelhouse. This is not something he's very comfortable with, and I think he's completely aware that he's bullshitting. And I don't mean bullshitting. It's like he's not making the maths up. It's like he already knows the answer, and actually he knows that they're cheating. And I think that is a giveaway. And I'm sure they did slightly rush him, but I also think that subconsciously is him trying to get out of this as quickly as possible because he is aware this is not an area of his expertise. That was my feeling, was that and the credit to him is that on first viewing he's so sure that you would go like, oh well, I'm sure the maths will I'm sure the math all works out, it all checks out, and then it's only, and of course again we're talking about a time when there weren't really VCRs, so that was it was one and done.
yeah.
He could get away with this. He was not planning on the likes of you. Well, I say the likes of you, and he was not planning on you and me, Ross, watching this segment over and over, and like it's the Zapruder footage, looking for when the head goes back and going like, that's the moment. So that was my gut instinct.
Oh. And obviously you compared it once again to the Alan Partridge USA 94 segments.
Yeah, I did. I did also say to you, it's like, I know we've mentioned that before. I know I've mentioned that before, but we now have to retire that reference because nothing else is. I mean, this is more Alan Partridge explaining World Cup 94 than Alan Partridge explaining World Cup 94. Because I've never in my life seen a more tortuous way of finding a date in a calendar.
Yeah, I mean, maybe secretly all of our, our Google calendars and everything are all secretly doing these amazing calculations behind the scenes that we don't realise.
God, no wonder the cloud uses so much electricity.
Yeah. And it has to do it for all of them. It has to do it for like Scottish bank holidays.
Oh my Robbie Burns night.
Yeah. In Rod's defence, there is actually an entire Wikipedia page about calculating the date of Easter, and it does read pretty similar to like a page about quantum physics. Like there is so much. If you scroll to the bottom of the thing,
I deliberately not looked at the bottom.
So that is how it is generally worked out. I don't know what that means. I don't know what any of that means, but that is the algorithm they use generally to work out Easter, and that is a pretty complicated thing, isn't it? I don't even understand how you would work that out.
No, I genuinely I look at that and weirdly it makes more sense than what I just thought with Michael Rod, and yet it makes no sense. No, genuinely, I mean that to me could be describing. That could be the formula of the mixture that dissolves the plutonium, and I would, if you tell me that, I would have gone like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Were it not for the fact that I recognise Easter in the bottom right-hand corner is the 9th of April, 2023, because it was what, 4 days ago. Yeah. But again, like I know it's being oversimplified, but you could also just use like a lunar calendar and a calendar and know roughly when Easter is, and you could just like slowly but surely, methodically work your way through and get the right.
Yeah, because it is.
These formulas are only for if you specifically want to look at like a date 50 years hence. and no one's done the manual bit, and you're like, well,
No.
I've got a formula to work it out. It's like, but you don't need that information.
No.
You really only need to know this year's and next year's, probably.
And I mean, if all else fails, because it is, Rod mentions, it is the first Sunday after the Passover full moon. So the
Yes.
first full moon on or after the 21st of March. So you could,
Yes.
if all else fails, just
That's
go
it.
outside and look at the sky and see
Very
whether
true,
how
yes.
full the moon is, and then work it out from there. Really, if that was
And then try and work out when the next Sunday is, which you should be able to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it was quite. This actually did throw up a couple of quite interesting things. When after the Pope stopped announcing it, and they decided that people needed to work it out for themselves, there was a lot of people who came up over the centuries. People came up with like tables of all the dates. They tried to calculate it far into the future, and they would come up with these tables, and people started following these tables of dates. The problem was that everyone kept calculating it wrong. So, and the problem was,
Well, I'm not surprised based on the formulas we've
the
seen.
issue is that a year isn't a year, as we know.
Oh, yeah.
A year
very true.
has got an extra quarter of a day on it, which is
Yeah.
why we now have leap years. So it turns out, and I did not know this, the Gregorian calendar that we all know and love and use, the main reason the Gregorian calendar was invented was to aid the calculation of Easter. Yeah,
Really?
because once
I did not know that.
they set this rigid set of rules for the calendar, it stopped what was previously happening with the old Julian calendar was the spring equinox kept moving around, and it kept messing up their calculations. It kept making Easter drift too far away. But once they came up with the Gregorian system, the equinox was fixed on the 21st of March. So that meant that the calculation would always work. So that's why they came up with a modern calendar, which I did not know at all.
Gosh.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah. That's an interesting invention to come out of that. Rod doesn't tell us that, though. But also, this calculator, Mark, this barcode power calculator.
What was that stupid game when we were kids?
Barcode
where you,
Battler?
got points. Yeah, that was what it was. Bloody hell.
I mean, this is the ultimate barcode. This is like the barcode, full 10 rounds battler. This is. I mean,
yeah.
But turns out it's an absolute superstar of the calculator world, Mark. It's considered one of the finest, greatest calculators ever made. That is the Hewlett-Packard HP41C. It was the first ever programmable calculator with a alphanumeric display on it.
Yep.
And it has, even to this day, has a massive fan base of people who can program it into doing things that it's not meant to do. So you can like make it play games or music or things.
I was about to say, can you play Doom on it?
Almost certainly, yes. But most excitingly for me, is that they used to use it on the space shuttle. It was
Really?
They used to take up
Okay.
and actually there's one in the National Air and Space Museum in Washington. So we may well have seen it because we went there.
Oh
didn't
wow,
we?
we did.
Still the
yeah.
finest museum I've ever been to.
Do you know? Yeah, that was good, wasn't it? That was the one out of town,
Yeah,
wasn't it? It was
yeah.
brilliant. That was well worth the trip. And that is so reassuring that even in space, astronauts can find out when Easter is.
But that's the thing. It was so good that they presumably they took up loads of sheets of paper.
We saw Enola Gay as well. didn't we, that one?
And the Blackbird.
Yeah.
Enola Gay,
Shall-
Blackbird, Concorde, the space shuttle, all in one building. Not to mention
Yes.
any number of Messerschmitts and Nazi aeroplanes there. So.
Was the Kitty Hawk there as
Oh.
well? Or no, that was the one in town.
Yeah.
But also the spaceship from Close Encounters of the Third
Oh,
Kind
yes,
was
of
right next to
course,
the
yeah.
shuttle. Weirdly, in its own little glass plate with nothing else around it except the space shuttle.
Yeah. That's a great day out. That was.
That was fab. Really enjoyed that.
I think probably they did, as you were suggesting, take up a load of barcodes on the space shuttle with them because they used this to do loads of their boring calculations of like gravity and fuel and stuff, and they could even, if the computer on the space shuttle broke down before re-entry, they could use one of these little calculators to do all of their re-entry calculations on in an
that's
emergency.
good, yeah.
So it was like their emergency computer. So this is the absolute top of the shop stuff, Mark. This is one of the greatest calculators of all time.
Russell, colour me impressed. I just wonder what they thought if they ever saw this segment of Rod scrambling around.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were a religious astronaut, would you be more disrespected by the bastardization of faith or the misuse of the most incredible life-saving calculator?
Do you think? But it may have been. Do you think maybe it was the case that NASA were going, right, we need a backup. We need backup for the shuttle. And then the salesman from Hewlett Packard walks in to the NASA offices and just goes, hang on, guys, this can calculate Easter. And they all went, what? You've got a machine that can calculate Easter? The most complicated sum in the history of the world? This will definitely be able to power a space shuttle. You know, you never know. That might be the ultimate test of computing, is being able to work out Easter.
Is calculating Easter. Yeah, I've never seen that. I didn't realize that was the base the base formula to show off complication.
Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. Oh, now I feel about this segment and the whole, you know, I feel a completely different way about this segment, Russ. Yeah. Oh, what a treat.
Yeah.
What an Easter treat.
I wonder if ChatGPT can calculate Easter. Might probably lie to us, wouldn't it?
I would,
Make up a different
it
date.
would. I still think one of my favorite things that I learned in the last few weeks was it Bing that started using AI to help people with their searches, and they had a journalist from Wired who was given a bit of an advanced sneaky peek so he could do an article about it. And he goes like, and initially it was really good until the Bing search engine started appealing to him to leave his wife for it. It was the one thing we didn't want to happen.
No. I am amused and terrified of this AI stuff in equal measure. I think it's going to be an interesting couple of years. I think.
Yeah, and because that'll be it then, won't it? We'll be dead in 2 years' time. So yeah. But what a journey! I was hoping to go to the next World Cup, but it's okay. The text message you sent to me, teasing me with the maths and the end segment, was you did not let me down, Russ. That was I honestly, it's one of those things where I think on a drunken night I might come home and rewatch that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I might add it to our Rod highlights reel on YouTube.
Yeah, should do.
Yeah.
It's a shame he didn't sing along to it, but you know we can't have everything. One day we will find a third song, and that'll be a very, very good day.
Okay, well, I mean, should we get out a particularly high-tech calculator for this?
I'll give you time
reckoning?
to scan the barcode, and then let's go. So let's start with the year in context for us. So 1981, well, March 1981, the cinema box office. What's the cinema box office?
We've got a top five. At number 5, it is low-quality sci-fi adventure Battle Beyond the Stars.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which I think is, if I'm right in remembering, it's actually a remake of The Magnificent Seven, but in space.
It's been a very, very long time since I've seen that film. I could not remember if there were 7 of them protecting a space village from...
I know Robert Vaughan's in it, and he was in the original Magnificent Seven as well, wasn't he?
Oh, I like how you were... Sorry, I just realized. I like the way you said that it's a remake of Magnificent Seven and not a remake of the Kurosawa classic it's based on. That's very good.
Number 4, Raging Bull.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Number 3, Ordinary People. Number 2, Private Benjamin.
Okay.
And number 1, What a Way to Make a Living, is 9 to 5.
Oh, that's a really good box office, isn't it?
I think so.
Some good films in that. Brilliant. Pop chart? What have you found?
Number 10, Capstick Comes Home, stroke The Sheffield Grinder.
Kate Capstick.
That's obviously immediately what popped in my mind as well. That's by Tony Capstick and the Carlton Main Frickley Colliery Band. That sounds northern, doesn't it? I think there might be some brass in that. Number 9, You Better You Bet by The Who. Watched an episode of You Bet recently. It's amazing how few people remember that it was originally presented by Bruce Forsyth.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was a Bruce Forsyth episode I watched. It was good entertainment. Now I think they should bring You Bet back. I don't see why.
Did you bet along with it?
No. But I mean, there must be just as many weirdos doing like weird nerdy stuff that they could bet on these days, isn't there?
Well, yeah, I'd say more so. But like, I wonder if it's a bit like obviously we realised one of the reasons that kind of Tomorrow's World petered out was because there were no real kind of scientific or engineering developments that would improve our lives because it was all about computers, and that doesn't really make good TV. And I wonder if like You Bet would be similar, where it's like, look how many barcodes I can scan with my scientific
Yeah. Right, anyway, number 8, Reward by The Teardrop Explodes. Number 7, Do, in brackets, The Hucklebuck by Coast to Coast. Number 6, Lately by Stevie Wonder. Number 5, Kings of the Wild Frontier by Adam and the Ants. Number 4, Four from Toya, EP by Toya. Number 3, Jealous Guy by Roxy Music. Number 2, Kids in America by Kim Wilde. And number 1, This Old House by Shaky. Have you seen the new Shakin' Stevens song?
No.
Genuinely great song.
He's got
a new song out. It's really good. Yeah. It's kind of, it kind of sounds like something else by somebody else. I'm going to say it is a pretty good song.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's about
I'll put that down in my notes.
It's quite
Shakin' Stevens song.
because obviously Comrade Shaky's famously an ex-communist, so it's quite it's sort of like it's very sort of anti-capitalist in its message sort of thing. Yeah,
really?
It's
wow.
quite
Okay.
a good song.
I'll check that out. I've just written it down in my notebook. Prices?
Well, 20-inch colour TV from Dixon's would cost you £240. Scientific calculator from Dixon's, £9.90, which is 61 quid these days. Gallon of petrol, £1.60. Full Cortina, 4,200. Pint of beer, 51p. 20 fag, 78 pence. Large loaf of bread, 35.5 pence. Can of Pepsi Cola, 17 pence. And average house price, £24,000.
Argos catalogue?
Knocking poor old Russell Hobbs into second place this month. It is the Swan Autosonic automatic kettle. Chromium plated, switches off automatically and buzzes when boiled. Exciting. Safety cutout, 3,000 watts, capacity 3 pints, BEAB approved, £22.99.
That seems quite good value. Do you know? I was thinking, like, as you can testify, I have a spreadsheet that tracks a lot of what we talk about and various bits and pieces. I don't track Russell Hobbs prices, I'm afraid, Russell. I'm so sorry. I know. Just sorry. It's one of those things. Maybe in the
Something
future.
for the people at home to do, isn't it?
Oh, please, if you can, that'd be great. Magazine covers.
Well, New Scientist has a sort of one of those sort of flat collages. It kind of slightly reminded me of a Gustav Klimt picture.
Okay.
Why astronomers need bigger telescopes. Scientific American has a picture of a Rubik's Cube, magic cubology. Popular Science has a very exciting looking drawing of a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Tilt engine V-stall, speeds like a plane, lands like a copter. Time magazine, The Curse of Violent Crime.
The Harrier already existed, though. Like, this was not an imaginary thing. The Harrier existed in the 60s, didn't it?
Yeah, but this is like is it the Osprey? It's called kind of similar.
Oh, I see.
Principle to that, where the engines,
rotors.
but it's actually jet engines, but they rotate rather than like they're.
Okay.
The whole thing is like, I don't think it exists. I think it's just a drawing.
Got you. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, Time magazine, The Curse of Violent Crime, and it's got a very disturbing picture of a man holding a snub-nosed pistol, and inside Soviet muscle in Asia. So yeah, I'm glad America solved that violent crime problem in the intervening years. That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, and Soviet muscle in Asia, that really worked out well for them in Afghanistan, didn't it? 14 Times, In Search of Dinosaurs, and it has a very sort of old-fashioned sort of picture of a big game hunter and a sort of Man Friday type character. Private Eye is called Private Pie, and I thought, well, what are you talking about there? And there's a very bald man on the cover, and I said, I wondered who that was. Turns out that it's Sir Peter Telford Hayman. Heard of him? No.
So he was a British diplomat, rumoured to be the deputy director of MI6, although this was obviously back in the time when they didn't reveal who was
when they
MI6.
were not verified, yeah.
But most importantly for Private Eye, he was a member of the Paedophile Information Exchange. And
oh my God.
so that's why it says Private Pie, P-I-E.
P-I-E, gotcha.
He was caught when he just left a load of his pedo stuff on a bus, which I find astonishing that an MI6 man would be on a bus. And anyway, Private Eye found out about this, reported it in 1980, and then a Tory MP called Geoffrey Dickens called him out in Parliament in 1981.
Oh, yeah, using the parliamentary privilege. Clever.
The Attorney General at the time was Michael Havers, who was Nigel Havers' dad. He just didn't bother to prosecute him. Didn't bother back in those days, did you? And poor old Geoffrey Dickens said that after, revealing this in Parliament, he was harassed quite a lot by various people, had death threats and all sorts against him, burglaries in his house. So, great stuff. Lovely story.
Wow, the past was really great, wasn't it? Let's all go back to it.
Very early issue of Viz Comic, a big size mega whack edition, peachy. HM Government Health Department's warning, don't eat horse droppings. And then Playboy has a picture of two very friendly-looking ladies in pink suspenders and high heels. And the headline is Twins, an irresistible survey of saucy sisters.
And I'm sure great articles as well. Let's do it. Let's audit this episode, Russ. Most important invention.
Most important invention. It's got to be the
Airbrushing?
Yeah,
The
digital
Photoshop?
digital printing and airbrushing situation.
I feel like that stands out this episode like some kind of innovative colossus.
Yeah, and all of the stuff Rod says is going to happen is genuinely what happened.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, and continues to happen. Most worthless invention.
Parasol.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. You're 100% correct. Most inaccurate prediction of the future. I mean, so there is the nuclear waste reclamation site that actually doesn't open for another 16 years.
Yeah, and they don't use the thing that she.
And actually, yes, you're right. It doesn't even use the technology that we're being shown. Frustratingly, that bloody axe is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's that. That must be the nuclear. I think it's the nuclear processing. Yes,
I would say so. Yeah. Gotta be.
Worst screw up by a presenter. Now, I almost wonder if we shouldn't retire presenter and just have worst screw up, because a couple of times we've bent the rules, and obviously the worst screw up is the fact that they mix segment 2 in way after it started, so that we miss Judith Hann's introduction. I don't think. I mean, obviously, we could, as always, we could always just point and laugh at Michael Ross and call it a day. But then we wouldn't be doing our job.
Kieran's absolutely useless swing of the axe.
Oh my god! I'm actually. Do you know what? Just. I tell you what. How about we do this, Russ? I don't know if you're on board. I'm just running with this. We retire by a presenter, so in the future it's worst screw up. But tonight, for one night only, just for this time, we go with the presenter and we say it's Kieran shaving a tiny sliver of wood off.
Yeah.
What a way to go out. Best attempt at making something boring interesting. The Easter formula. Yeah.
He's managed to make some of the most entertaining maths I've ever seen.
To be fair, I did enjoy looking up, because I was rereading my notes when that was on. I'm thinking like, oh yeah, what did I think about this? And then I looked up, and you had the biggest grin in your face that I've seen for such a long time. You were just happy as Larry. So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Best use of music.
I guess it's got to be the button up your overcoat in there.
Yeah, I think it has to be. We don't have much choice, so let's go with that one. Best or worst use of furniture?
Well, the only noticeable furniture I saw in it was Judith's patio furniture.
Yeah.
Or I guess that sort of, I don't know, would all that church stuff count as furniture?
I was thinking, but it's basically just a table, isn't it? Which is boring. So I do agree with the patio. I do have a left field answer to see see what you feel about this. How about the innovative use of an armoire in the nuclear processing plants?
Yeah, there would be something to see an actual armoire in the middle of that nuclear power station. Yeah, go on then.
Fair enough then. That'll make no sense to us when I reread that in about 10 years' time. Most notable clothing.
I think it's got to be. All of the presenters are wearing incredibly boring clothing.
Yes.
Throughout this, so I think it's a toss-up between the hipster throwing the axe in his full hipster kit.
Yeah. Which is actually the first image of the entire show.
Or the nuclear workers wearing entirely inappropriate donkey jacket outfits for working in a nuclear power plant.
I was also thinking, because Kieran changes an outfit, his beige suit of seriousness, I thought might be in the mix as well. Do you know what? I like the donkey jacket one.
Yeah.
Because I think your observation that if you showed this clip, if you showed the clip of those, because we see a clip of the guys in the donkey jacket, and Sue says 35 of these men's colleagues suffered the consequences of this nuclear attack. Actually, we never hear what happens to them. I don't know. They may have died, or they may have. Obviously, you've now indicated that actually maybe some of them really did suffer. But you made a really good observation, which I know we discussed earlier. Which is like, if you show this clip to anyone now, they would never ever guess that they worked at a nuclear power plant.
No.
So I think that is very notable clothing indeed. Did we see anything in the episode that made it through to the future? So yes, to be frank, starting with that axe, which I find incredible.
Yep, the axe, definitely churning them out still.
Yep, pills.
Yeah, time delay pills, definitely. Yeah. Obviously, as you said, the printing stuff, definitely.
Yeah, all the airbrush, the Photoshop airbrushing stuff. Thorpe, the waste process. I mean, it got there. It did make it through to the future. Not as we're sold here, but like they got it back up and running. And
stockpiles still happening.
Yeah, stockpiled cars. Yeah. And apparently that calculator, obviously,
Absolute bee's
which
knees.
I think really is the whole point of that segment, is the absolute bee's knees. Yeah. And what does this episode tell us about the 26th of March, 1981?
So drab, so grey, so beige.
Yeah. This is interesting. So this is the third episode we watched from 1981. And we watched, I think, a couple from 1980 as well. And when we watched that first episode, the thing that struck us, when anyone asks me about the podcast, I'm always tempted to kind of swerve them away from the first episode because it is our most amateur not that this is professional, our most amateur. But actually, I think it was really fun, and partly because I think there was definitely a point where we looked at each other in horror, thinking like, "Oh my god, is every single episode of Tomorrow's World in this era going to be as bleak and dour as this?" And actually, weirdly, the other episodes of 1981 or that era haven't. They've been very much the Tomorrow's World we remember. This is so much more like that first episode than I expected.
Yeah.
Even down to like some of the subject matter being similar and a classic Sue Ingle mispronunciation. There's no degrizzling machine, but there is an armoire. Yeah, it's bleak and dour, isn't it?
Totally.
Obviously, to be fair, this is only like just a month and a bit after your birthday. So maybe it's fitting. Tropes, Russ. Presenter having to speak over louder sounds. We got close a couple of times, but nothing.
Yeah, I was sure. I mean, there were a couple of loud bits of machinery, but the presenters remained resolutely quiet while they were on.
Something to do with oil rigs? Unfortunately, not. Suspiciously obvious brand name and the ad-free BBC. So by my reckoning, there are at least 3. There's the Radio Times itself, which I appreciate was a BBC product or BBC Worldwide product, but still there was the AA, and then there was Renault because that was still the drawing. So that, to my mind, there's a minimum of 3.
Yeah, but I don't know. None of them seemed all that obvious, though, were they? They weren't rubbing your face in it. I don't know.
Well, Radio Times, Radio Times, Radio Times. And Kieran can shut up about he doesn't say the RAC, he says the AA.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
The Renault was subtle. I'd go with that one. But I think Radio Times, it was basically an advertisement for the Radio Times.
Yeah, the BBC was allowed to advertise the Radio Times, wasn't it? It was one of the few things it was allowed. It was one of the only things it was allowed to advertise about then, wasn't it? Because it belonged to it. I think there was some sort of loophole that allowed it to advertise its own magazines.
So, God, you're talking me out of this, Russ. All right, fair enough, yeah. All right, and I suppose the AA, I mean, I know they provided car insurance, not car insurance, but like, recovery protection, but I suppose it actually is also like a think tank. Clear and blatant lying? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. Rod does not follow that Easter formula, Russ.
No, he doesn't, does he?
No, not at all.
Did he say for
and that's a minimum.
For argument's sake? No, what does he say? For the sake of...
Yeah, for the sake of
argument.
19 by 4 for the sake of argument, which is, to be fair, I mean, now that I've thought about it, is a classic maths term, isn't it? No evil farmers.
No.
I can't think of any casual sexism off the top of my head beyond maybe at a push the fact that he puts the whorish makeup on Judith Hann and not, Kieran. I mean, actually, if he put it on Kieran, it would have been funnier. But, I don't know. That's me pushing.
Yeah.
Weirdly, you highlighted this in the notes when the segment about the UV protecting parasol starts, and initially it begins with some pictures of some very porcelain shaded Victorian women. It then cuts to because Judith says, "Oh, this is how it used to be. This is lily white skin was the fashion, but now it's a bit more about tans." It cuts to surely the sexiest image Tomorrow's World has ever broadcast.
It's a very racy image of that lady in the bikini, isn't it?
She's
for 1981.
A hot-bodied woman in a gold bikini. Yeah. Does that count as casual sexism? She's a mere object.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I mean,
it's not what we normally.
You would never. I don't think you'd be able to illustrate a all-out. Well, I suppose
I mean, you could. Plenty of tanned men out there, Russ. I mean, look at us.
Who do you think? I was thinking about this a while back. Each different generations have a different famous tanned person, isn't there? That's always referred to. So I remember when we were kids, it was always the American actor George Hamilton was always
or Bob Monkhouse.
Yeah, and then in Britain it was Bob Monkhouse.
Yeah, but George Hamilton.
Yeah,
was,
and in Britain it was Bob
definitely.
Monkhouse. Yeah, you're right there.
Yeah.
But then Monkhouse got phased out in favour of Dale Winton and David Dickinson, the Duke, my friends.
Of course, your personal.
Yeah. And I was just trying to think: is there who's the most recent? I guess I suppose there's
Rylan, is he tanned?
yeah, it's probably somebody like that, isn't it? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I suppose you've got the all those Jersey Shore people in America. They're probably famously tanned as well, aren't they?
Oh,
Is it
well,
is
in
it
that
Schnook-
case,
Schnookums?
the only way is Essex.
Schnookums? What's her name?
No, Schnooky, wasn't it? But is it Gemma Arthurton? Like, isn't she?
Gemma
from,
Gemma
The Only
Arterton's
Way
the
is
one
Essex?
from James
No.
Bond. And
Oh yeah. The sexy civil servant. Well, there's some woman who's from anyone from Towie or The Only Way is Chelsea, whatever the goddamn thing is called. I genuinely don't watch this.
no.
Yeah, it's probably more like to be a reality star, isn't it? And actually, the thing about Ryan, I don't know if he's particularly tanned. It's more that his teeth.
I
are
mean, he's got some
brilliant
very Rod-esque teeth, hasn't he?
white. I know you don't like football, Russ, but there's a Liverpool player called Roberto Firmino, and he's leaving at the end of the season, and he's Brazilian, I think. And there's a podcast I listen to, and they always refer to him as Bobby Chump. Bobby Chump. It's Roberto Firmino. He has, just Google him, he has the whitest teeth you ever see. And the story goes that he went to a dentist, I think in Liverpool, with some of his with some of his teams, and they basically said, like, here's the spectrum, 1 to 10. How white do you want your teeth? And he just said to them, maximum. His teeth are absolutely brilliant white. And like, he smiles all the time, and he is very happy with his teeth. That's why in one podcast they simply refer to him as Bobby Chompers.
Do you think that gives him any sort of
Maximum.
advantage during the games, though, like blinding the opposition team?
Well, the floodlights are on more often than not. So yeah, I think he's onto something there, isn't he? No Dutch angles. There is an item presented from a gantry.
Love to see it, Mark. Love to see it.
Absolutely, it might be the one I enjoyed the most.
yeah.
I mean, because certainly I probably enjoy it more than Evil Farmers and Casual Sexes when I think about it.
Yeah, Sue is doing some excellent gantry work there, isn't she? She's got a hard hat on, her overalls.
She's actually just doing some great OB work in general. Some of the best imagery in the program comes from Sue meandering around Windscale. Episode ends in a damn squib.
Don't be ridiculous, Mark.
Couldn't be further from that.
It ends in the fiery heat of mathematics.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, lasers,
laser printer thing,
magnets. Yes. Boats? Question mark?
No.
And Baxter buggers off.
I'm glad you added that there, lovely.
I do try and remember these things, Russ, yeah. So that's it. That's that episode done. Episode 29. They said it couldn't be done, Russ. It was a madman's dream that we get as many as 29 episodes, but we're not resting on our laurels. However, like all good things, everything enjoyable is finite. And there are times I think maybe I won't see it through to 2120 when Sellafield will finally be decommissioned. But I have to, Russ, because I think we're still in theory supposed to be pulling out episodes by then. But I can tell you right now, you and the listeners, I can tell you right now, currently there are only 1,380 episodes left for us to order.
Oh, how did you calculate that so quickly, Mark? Have you've been taking tips from Michael Rodd?
I you know what? I just pulled it off the barcode from the back of my milk.
Excellent. Well, before we go, I just wanted to say that next episode is a very special episode, Mark. It's
very special.
It's episode 30.
30.
And we've got a great treat.
I remember when we did 5 and we thought it was miraculous.
Yeah. But April the 30th of this year will be the 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web, Mark. And so for our episode 30, it's all the 30s. We have a very special episode all about the web with some very special guest stars, which I am eager to. I can't wait to do my research on those guest stars, Mark. I bet I'll turn up all sorts of entertaining snippets from YouTube and the like. But
all I'll say, as I said to you earlier, is that I watched the first couple of minutes of the episode that we're going to do next. The special guest came on, and I found something else to do instead. Now, I'm assuming I love them in the end. It was one of those things where, like, no, honestly, I have something else I need to be doing right now. I'll save this for a better time. So, hey, if that doesn't get you juices flowing, people, I don't know what will.
Well, Mark, I'm going to have to leave you now. There's been a new restaurant opening in town. I'm going to go down there and try it out for dinner. It's called Judith's Cafe. Everything's served on a lead-lined plate.
Yeah.
And there's I've not had a chance to look at any of the menus, so I don't really know what kind of food they serve there. But The reviews are absolutely glowing. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, that sounds fabulous.
So I'll have to leave you now. Until next time, if you are on the internet, we will see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.